Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1302 of the War News stream. And we have very big news today that Venezuela's launched a counter-operation against the U.S. forces in the region. We've also heard that Poland has found a new drone crashed in their territory. And also, Russia is once again threatening to strike NATO troops if they're sent to Ukraine. And we have very big news today. It's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear that the armed forces of Venezuela have begun operations and maneuvers against the United States of America in terms of force posturing, with Venezuelan armed forces now conducting military exercises along the islands of the Venezuelan coast, while at the same time the Venezuelans have also paraded the KH-31P missile, an air-to-surface missile fired by Russian made and fielded aircraft that have been provided to the state of Venezuela. The United States of America is continuing to posture in the area of Puerto Rico at the moment, with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit and a significant amount of naval vessels under the command of U.S. Second Fleet at this moment that are currently around Puerto Rico or within the Eastern Caribbean Sea. The United States of America has also continued to conduct its posturing against the nation of Venezuela throughout the region, and we have also been able to hear that the United States of America has continued forward with aggressive rhetoric against the country, as it does appear that both sides are maneuvering at this moment for the preparations of a full-blown war. Inside of Europe, we've also been able to hear that the Russian Federation has declared NATO forces targets if they are to enter the state of Ukraine in an attempt at a peacekeeping operation post-war. This is following right after the statements by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov yesterday, in which Dmitry Peskov stated publicly that the Russian Federation considers itself to be in a de facto state of war with the NATO alliance. On top of that, we have been able to hear that Poland has found another Russian drone that apparently was ditched inside of a tree near to the major city of Lublin within southeastern Poland. Polish authorities are currently investigating the matter, but it is already clear that this was a Russian drone that had entered the country during one of the prior attacks and apparently was unlocated up until this point. The Republic of Poland is continuing to insist that the situation is quite strenuous, as we have been able to see that over the course of the day, they have conducted their first live fire tests of the Patriot air defense batteries that they have been provided, with Poland now fielding 2 full Patriot air defense systems inside their country. It turns out that the drone that flew over the government buildings in Warsaw yesterday was actually flown by a Ukrainian citizen who has now been deported back to Ukraine. We have also been able to hear that an anti-war minister inside of the country has resigned inside of the Russian Federation. That marker is not supposed to be in Warsaw. That is actually supposed to be in Moscow. A little bit weird how that got mixed up. Anyways, we have
kind of weird. It's kind of like how those Russian drones ended up in Poland too. They weren't supposed to be there either, so got to get the markers on the right side again.
Honestly, that was a good way to put that all together. Like, that was a good way. On top of that, we have been able to hear that the Lithuanian state has foiled an assassination plot over the course of last year, where multiple incendiary bombs and other types of bombs were attempted to be mailed throughout the entirety of the European Union to target and kill key individuals that are in support of the state of Ukraine and against the Russian Federation. Latvia also called a spy today inside their country who was attempting to gather key intelligence and information about Latvian military facilities, sites, and those of NATO forces that are also inside the country. The state of Ukraine has continued to hold the lines today throughout most of the country, of course, in causing a large amount of casualties against the Russian Federation's armed forces. However, the Russian Federation is making minor advances near to the area of the Kupiansk front, and according to their pipeline breakthrough, which occurred a little while ago, it does appear that some Russian forces have been able to enter the very northern area of the city of Kupiansk, although they are starting to meet heavy Ukrainian resistance at this point. Inside the Middle East, we have been able to hear that the Saudi Arabians have now created a mutual defense pact with Pakistan, stating that an attack against one nation or the other will generally be an attack on both. This is generally meant to counter the Islamic Republic of Iran within the area, considering that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia both consider the Islamic Republic of Iran to be a hostile nation. The Islamic Republic of Iran has also stated that they will be making absolutely no concessions to the European Union today on the matter of nuclear weapons development. There has also been an unidentified explosion near to the Aleppo airport. We do not know exactly what exploded around the Aleppo airport or why, but we were able to confirm that there was a significant explosion within the area today. And inside of China, we got a rare up-close look at a Chengdu J-20, and the results were shocking. That kind of sounds like clickbait, but we'll get into why it was shocking here in a little bit later on in the stream, but it was something that's telling us a lot that we did not know until today. But we have loads and loads of news to cover tonight. Of course, as usual, the news days these days are not quiet days. They are incredibly busy and incredibly active days, and there's nothing but news in literally every single corner of the world to be able to cover on what's been going on against the Western sphere and against the West's interests as a whole. And of course, we're going to be getting into that news tonight, covering the most important topics first, and then moving down the list in terms of priority. Moving us on into the Caribbean, we have been able to hear that Venezuela has been conducting armed maneuvers against the United States of America today, as Venezuela has announced military exercises on their islands off of the coast inside of the northern regions of the country. According to information that we've been able to hear, Venezuela has begun military drills on a Caribbean island in reaction to the U.S. Navy's deployment of warships inside the area. This is one of the first times outside of the F-16s that buzzed the USS Jason Dunham that we have seen direct belligerent action by the Venezuelans against U.S. forces within the region. This is also something that's a little bit significant considering that there is a small amount of islands that could generally be considered a barrier between the mainland of Venezuela and the U.S. forces further on out inside the Eastern Caribbean and inside of Puerto Rico. From what we understand, there are some elements of the Venezuelan military. It is unknown how large these elements are or what exactly they are equipped with, but they are conducting military exercises on some of these smaller islands that are directly off of the coast of northern Venezuela and directly facing up against the United States forces under the command of 2nd Fleet and U.S. Southcom as a whole. The Venezuelans have also today paraded out the KH-31, which is a fairly interesting missile, and this is one that we actually have to go into a little bit of analysis on and speak about to a great deal, because showing this missile means something quite important, at least to the Venezuelans. So here's the clip that they showed, and then we'll go into why this is an important one to note. Okay, we're going to be muting that. That's copyrighted. But we can see here that they're showing off a KH-31. Now, these things are a little bit interesting. These were actually produced by the Soviet Union, and are still used in the modern day by the Russian Federation and a large number of countries that are aligned with the Russian Federation or the People's Republic of China. The KH-31 is famously known for being Russia's only suppression of enemy air defense missile systems, meaning that these missile systems are designed to be able to pick up the radiation emitted by air defense radars and to be able to fly straight to that radar, slamming into it and destroying it. Some other variants of the KH-31s are actually anti-ship missiles and do have a decent range, at least for the anti-ship missile role. We unfortunately do not know what exact variant this is at the moment that was on board these Venezuelan Su-30s, whether they were KH-31Ps of the SEAD variety or the SEAD variety, or those of the anti-ship variety. It's a little bit unclear. Nevertheless, in either form, this missile is a significant threat, and the showcasing of it is to the United States Armed Forces within the region. We do have to remember that the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, along with the United States Navy, primarily operates as, at least for the moment in a defensive sense, an air defense force. The Venezuelans have no way to directly conduct an amphibious or armed landing of the island of Puerto Rico or any U.S. territories within the area, or really, more so to bring the fight directly to the United States. The only thing that they can conduct, however, is harassing attacks against the United States Navy, either by launching anti-ship missiles at our warships or by trying to suppress the enemy, well, the American air defense inside of Puerto Rico that would be operated by the United States Marine Corps, which could come in a wide variety of different air defense systems. The Marine Corps doesn't primarily use Patriot air defense systems. They generally use smaller, more short-range air defense systems, but we'll get into everything that the Marines use a little bit later on. Nevertheless, these missiles, either in the anti-ship or SEAD role, are somewhat threatening, at least with their presence, and it is the Venezuelans' attempt to posture, in a sense, to show that they will be able to at least attempt to either target American ships within the area or American air defense radar systems within the area. We can see them conducting a patrol over the northern coast of Venezuela. We can actually see the Caribbean there under this Su-30 in the clip. And this is once again another attempted forced posturing by the nation of Venezuela against the United States of America. Interestingly enough, this Su-30, which generally Su-30s have a decent ability to carry a larger weapons loadout, are actually flying somewhat light. This thing is only carrying 2 KH-31Ps. Just to give you all an idea of how many KH-31s this thing could carry, it could hypothetically carry about 4 of these. An Su-24, which is usually what we've seen in the war in Ukraine using the KH-31s, generally can carry 3 as an absolute maximum. 2 on the outer wing, on the inner wing pylons, and 1 on the center line. The Su-30 can technically carry additional KH-31s under the engine nacelles here on the bottom of the fuselage. However, we're not seeing those, at least in the clip, and it appears that both of these Su-34s may be only flying at half capacity in terms of the available amount of KH-31Ps that they can carry, only carrying 2 instead of 4. This could be suggesting that the Venezuelan Air Force is attempting to emphasize maneuverability with these aircraft, trying to lighten their load, so that way in the SEAD operation, they were a little bit more maneuverable and can conduct a greater deal of evasive maneuvers at a faster speed to be able to try and wear out the kinetic energy of incoming air defense missiles in a hypothetical air war scenario. Or it may be the fact that the Venezuelans do not have a large amount of KH-31Ps, and for this reason they were only able to fit out these Su-30s with about a half-ended loadout, only 2 instead of the full 4 that they can carry. Another thing that's a little bit interesting about this is that if these Su-30s are only carrying 4 of these KH-31s, either in the SEAD role or the anti-ship missile role, we aren't really sure which one, that still is not enough to do really much of anything, at least speaking in an actual littoral sense, if a conflict or a battle was to break out. 4 anti-ship missiles is incredibly easy for a U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke destroyer to be able to defeat, and for an air defense system of really any type, including those on board the Arleigh Burke and the Ticonderoga class missile cruiser that we have within the area, it would be light work to be able to engage and shoot down these KH-31s while they are on their way. Specifically, the SEAD variety has a range of about 110 miles, meaning that the U.S. Navy has a 110-mile range from these weapons launch point to be able to shoot them down, and that's quite a large amount of time, at least in terms of missile defense terms. That would probably be about a minute or about a minute and a half terms of flight time for the Navy to be able to engage and shoot down these anti-ship or SEAD missiles. So while the Venezuelans are attempting to posture, and it is quite aggressive compared to what they've been doing prior, at least over the past few weeks, it is not posing an extreme threat to the United States of America, but these are the first confirmed maneuvers that we can see after the President of the United States issued an order to U.S. Southcom that any aircraft that were to come within a dangerous range of U.S. forces within the Caribbean, either under the command of Second Fleet or Southcom as a whole, were to be engaged and shot down without any warning. This is something that a lot of people have been talking about, at least for the moment, is the Venezuelan maneuvers in the area, and equally so, we have been able to see continued developments of the 22nd MEU, which is inside the area of Puerto Rico. We were able to see this footage here published by the Department of Defense here in the United States of America, showing the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit conducting amphibious landing rehearsals in Puerto Rico during the first weeks of September in support of Southcom priorities, specifically against the nation of Venezuela, which we will be able to see here in this clip once again. They made it into a bit of a music video, which is a little bit unfortunate, and we of course cannot play the copyrighted audio, but we can see here the AH-1Zs flying over the hovercraft. We can also see the larger infantry elements of the 22nd MEU, along with their strategic airlift capabilities, mortars, and a wide variety of other systems that are flashing by so quickly I really can't talk about them, being shown during these amphibious landing drills that were conducted inside of Puerto Rico.
They put a lot of work into this edit too. Sort of unusual for DoD footage to have edits like this on it with music behind it, but you know, I guess it's a thing. Oh wow, that's a pretty cool outro too. It's honestly like they're copying what Ukraine did with their war footage. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting with that. It's a really bizarre sort of a thing. Never really seen something like this before. But beyond that, it is definitely showing us that the United States of America is attempting to publicly show that they are force posturing within the area around Puerto Rico, and most importantly, they continue to showcase the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit's amphibious landing capabilities, which is a direct threat against the nation of Venezuela in the implied threat that the 22nd MEU could make a landfall inside of Venezuela rapidly and effectively, and then pretty much create a beachhead or an airhead for the United States to further exploit, and then bring in an even larger number of forces into the fight than what we would see at least at the initial onset. All of this is giving us a pretty decent picture that tensions are running quite high within this region, and I do want to make it quite clear that while Enforcer Matt and me do not think that this is the greatest maneuver to take at the moment, considering that World War III is just around the corner, at least as far as Europe is concerned, as far as the posturing is going at the moment, this is not a major conflict by any means. This generally will go down in history, if it does happen, as another Central or North-South American conflict that has once again occurred and will quickly end. It doesn't really appear, at least from what we can see by anything that the Venezuelans are publishing, that they would pose a significant threat even to the U.S. forces within the region currently, or much less so, a larger U.S. force that may eventually attempt to depose the Maduro regime inside of Venezuela. Still, a lot of people are talking about current U.S. actions within the area in response to the Venezuelans' maneuvers that have been conducted today, moving against the United States within the Eastern Caribbean, and whether or not the United States will start to directly attack these armed forces that are currently amassing on the islands off of the coast of Venezuela, or more so, the Venezuelan Air Force, which continues to conduct air operations directly off the coast of Venezuela as well. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so since we've seen Venezuela take the big step of launching a counter drill to the U.S. drills in the area of the Caribbean, right now the big question is, will the U.S. attack the Venezuelans while they're conducting these military drills, which could be viewed as a hostile response to the United States presence in the region? And it looks like 42% said no, the U.S. will merely observe the military drills and simply take notes on it, while 32% said yes, the U.S. will attack the Venezuelan naval response, and 21% said it's a 50-50 chance right now. And this one is a bit tricky because technically, if the U.S. was looking for some type of provocation, this would be a decent chance that the U.S. could take to say, hey, look, Venezuela now aggressed against us by launching its military drill, and now we're going to attack their drill as a response to that. They could say that, but at the same time, though, I'm not really sure if they're ready to pull the trigger on it yet. I think they're waiting to see what's going to happen here. They're waiting to see exactly what Venezuela's full response is going to be. So I think I'm leaning toward the U.S. is going to merely observe this, and if they're going to launch an attack on the Venezuelan government, they'll probably launch it later on down the road after these drills have concluded. That is my best guess, so I'm with the 41%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm generally with the 41%, at least for now. I don't know what will be happening within the next few months, But at least at the moment, while my esophagus just collapsed there on air, that's a great thing to have. But beyond that, I would have to say that I would certainly believe that the United States, at least at the moment, is going to be observing the Venezuelan maneuvers, as I do not believe that we have a proper force within the area, at least at the moment, to conduct any significant offensive actions against Venezuela. We certainly do have enough forces in the area to conduct a defensive action, but offensive actions would generally be a little elusive at the moment. While it is entirely possible, with the forces that we have in the area right now, to be able to conduct an offensive operation against Venezuela, we would be going up against larger odds, which is something that you generally would not like to see, at least in an actual military endeavor. We would like to see that the United States has overwhelming and superior firepower against that of the nation of Venezuela. And so for that reason, I would generally say that for now, considering that we only have one Marine Expeditionary Unit, one Amphibious Ready Group, and a couple of destroyers and a Ticonderoga class cruiser within the area, I would not say that this is a force that would be requisite enough to be able to conduct an offensive attack against the actual Venezuelan armed forces themselves and open up a larger conflict. We do not know.
Honestly, I think the U.S. is looking for a much bigger justification, I guess you could say, because we have seen so far the U.S. has pretty much limited their operations to striking drug boats, or alleged drug boats that we're seeing right now off the coast of Venezuela. So they've limited their actions to that. But the problem with that is, though, that's very limited. That's not an attack on Venezuela and the mainland itself. So for them to expand, for the U.S. military to expand their strikes on the Venezuelan mainland, I think they need a pretty strong justification to sell it to the public that there was a real cause for doing that. So I think the U.S. might be waiting to see if maybe Venezuela makes a mistake of attacking a U.S. naval vessel, which would obviously give us the clear justification to strike the Venezuelan government. But until then, though, it's a little bit tricky because honestly, Enforcer, do you see a really good just cause for an attack on Venezuela by the U.S. military right now? Because me personally, it would be very weak, at least for right now.
In terms of diplomatic justifications, it doesn't really appear that there is a large chance of a proper justification to occur at the moment. We have seen that the U.S. Department of Defense, along with the Secretary of State, have been attempting to construct a proper casus belli, or at least an alleged casus belli at the moment, that Nicolas Maduro is generally just an extension of a larger boogeyman, the cartels which operate inside of South America and Central America, and for that reason, his government is illegitimate, considering that they are running the country as a dictatorship. Not only that, it's largely an extension of a cartel, which has been declared as a terrorist organization recently, and for this reason, his government could be deposed. That at least is the attempted casus belli for now. However, there is a bit of an issue with that. At the moment, Maduro's government and the armed forces of Venezuela have not taken direct armed action against the United States of America within the region, and the United States has not directly labeled the nation of Venezuela and its government as a terrorist organization or a terrorist state. We have only stated that Maduro is a part of the cartels and has put about a $50 million bounty on his head for his capture alive, not dead. This is a bit of an issue, at least at the moment, because the United States would have to try and make some sort of an argument that it is a terrorist state and therefore not privy to the protections that most sovereign states would be found to, of course, possess in the international realm, for example, the United Nations, and that isn't really seen, at least at the moment. So I believe that what we're doing right now, just to be entirely honest with y'all, is that we're trying to provoke the Venezuelans into shooting at us, because a lot of what we're doing is clearly provocative, at least in terms of the actions. Or as Will Ferrell said, it's provocative. It gets the people going. Because what we've been doing against Venezuela, just to put it out there from an international law sense, we have attacked Venezuelan boats inside of Venezuelan territorial waters, not the waters of their exclusive economic zone, of the territorial waters, which is an incredibly short jaunt off of the coast. That is incredibly provocative. Another thing that we've done is that we have seized a tuna boat inside of their territorial waters as well, on board the USS Jason Dunham, which sent out an away team to be able to seize that vessel. So far, we have 3 hostile actions that have been conducted against Venezuelan boats inside of Venezuelan waters by the United States Navy. On the face of it, whether or not we're pro-American or anything else, This is something that is clearly supposed to be provoking the Venezuelan government. Many countries around the world would actually consider any one of those individual actions to be an act of war, and generally there would most likely be an armed response. It doesn't appear that Venezuela is taking the bait because it appears that the Venezuelan government, while incredibly incompetent and quite stupid for the larger part, does realize that this is an attempt to bait them into an armed response against the United States so that way the United States would have a defensive casus belli. Because the way that this generally would go, at least at the moment with everything that we've laid out so far, we have tried to lay out that Maduro's government is dangerous and an extension of the cartel, but we have no direct way to show the public here in the United States or the international world at large that he is incredibly dangerous. The best way we could do that is for him to order his armed forces to fire at the United States armed forces, which are inside of U.S. Southcom Command. If they do that, then we not only have a proper justification to say not only is he in support of the cartels, but he is violently in support of them and conducting armed belligerent action in their aid and defense, but we also have a defensive casus belli at that point because we are defending U.S. forces and interests in the region, and that is our jumping point to start off a full-blown attack against the nation of Venezuela and an attempted deposition of the Maduro government. And that's generally the kind of justifications that I would see, at least at the moment, with how all of this is going.
Yeah, I would say right now there's another possibility as well. It could be the U.S. has deployed such a large, vast amount of military resources to the area. And once again, it's such a large deployment, it's hard to believe that the U.S. wouldn't do some type of attack because it would be a wild waste of money to launch all these different F-35s, these ships, etc., down to Venezuela's coast to then do nothing about it. That'd be a huge waste of money. But it could be they're trying to maybe see if they can pressure the Venezuelan government to push the Chinese back out. Like, for example, to abandon the oil rigs that are being developed and built around the area of Venezuela. They could be seeing if maybe Maduro's going to back down, but I doubt he is because China is very deep into Venezuela right now. So I don't know. Like, to me, it seems like an attack is coming. It seems like that to me, but maybe it's a pressure tactic, but this would be an extremely expensive pressure tactic. Like, we're talking about billions and billions in pressure tactics.
You know, I gotta say that if what we're working off of right now is the plan, we're really doing it quite poorly. I'll actually be honest here, because if we wanted to goad the Venezuelans into shooting at something down there, so that way we could say, oh look, now we have a justification to respond. He's incredibly violent. We've amassed at least a large enough force within the area that they wouldn't even be able to chip a dent at anything or even get the idea to be able to do that. That's generally why the Venezuelans haven't done anything yet. What we are seeing, for the larger part, however, is that the United States continues to try and provoke the Venezuelans into an armed action against us, and the Venezuelans are too scared to do that because we have too many forces in the area. What would have made a little bit more sense, just speaking about gaming out the Venezuelans to attack us to have a proper casus belli, if that's what the U.S. government was looking for, just to try and make the plan work, whether it's good or not, would have been to just send down one Arleigh Burke, pretty much move everything out of the area, so that way that one Arleigh Burke looks like a clear, obvious target, and then start to seize boats and strike them around the area. With one ship within the area, Venezuela might have gone, you know what, if we hit that thing or we attempt to attack it, there really wouldn't be a larger response. Clearly, an Arleigh Burke would be able to defend itself against any attack that Venezuela could throw its way, and we could also just mobilize the U.S. Air Force in Northcom's command, or Southcom's command, to immediately come to the aid of the ship and help it out in its air defense, but we didn't do that. We have such a large force within the area currently, I think it's shying the Venezuelans away from conducting any armed action, which I believe is what the administration is currently looking for, to be able to try and justify a defensive casus belli against the Venezuelans. That's generally what I'm thinking at the moment, and I think that we've kind of scared the Venezuelans into not responding to anything at all for now. Now, that is opposite, however, to the war games the exercises that the Venezuelans are conducting today and the parading of the KH-31Ps. But in terms of direct armed action, rather than just maneuvers against the United States, we're not seeing any of that developing, and it appears that Maduro is being incredibly cautious about even getting close to conducting that sort of an action against the United States. Tensions are running high, but I generally think that Maduro is at least smart enough for now to back off and not engage the United States, knowing what would be following soon after. So I hope that does
Maybe
address.
so. Also, by the way, I see people mentioning the oil in Venezuela. That keeps that's a recurring theme at this point. People keep bringing up the oil, and that is a consideration. I'll still say that it's a huge consideration right now because that's one of the main reasons economically that China is trying to get their tentacles so deep into Venezuela is because they want to access that oil. But the only problem is though the oil in Venezuela, according to what I've seen, is what's considered dirty oil. It's very hard to refine it. It takes a specialized process, and right now China has brought in a floating oil rig, apparently to Lake Maracaibo, which is the largest lake there near Venezuela, and they're starting to refine that oil. That apparently just happened earlier this month, which was early in the month of September, and it has a pretty large refining capacity. So the fact that these Chinese companies are showing up with these oil facilities, that's obviously concerning to the United States because once China gets in there, it's hard to get them out. So that's probably why we're moving right now. But the only problem is, though, we know what are we going to do here? Are we going to attack the Venezuelan government and then, I guess, topple Maduro to then push the Chinese out manually, or what is the objective? That's still what I'm trying to figure out. I'm still not understanding that.
I would have to say it's a little bit hard to know at the moment. Just to be honest with you all, the current administration's foreign policy prerogatives are mysterious, and they're not really made well known to the public at all. So we have no clue what the real foreign policy prerogatives are here or what the big picture looks like. But one thing that I will say is that a lot of people are talking about the oil inside of Venezuela, and I actually give you all a little bit of a more technical explanation of what Venezuelan oil is, or at least the issue that lies in it. Venezuelan oil is considered to be a heavy oil or a dirty oil because it has a high sulfur content inside of it. High sulfur contents are generally not sought after in terms of refining oils or petroleums easily. You really do not have an easy time refining high sulfur content oils of crude of any type. That's why Venezuela's oil reserves have generally gone untapped through most of the prior century, is because nobody wants to go through the incredibly expensive and laborious process of trying to refine Venezuelan high sulfur content oil. So for that reason, that's why we see that we haven't really touched it. The Venezuelans haven't really touched it. Nobody's really touched it. The Chinese are starting to touch it right now, and they're currently sending in oil drilling platforms into Lake Maracaibo here within the western area of Venezuela to actually be able to try and tap into that high sulfur content oil and to be able to try and process it. There are two things that come out of that, at least for the People's Republic of China, and also as far as we're concerned on a strategic perspective. One, the People's Republic of China is now tapping into a new oil resource, and that makes China less energy dependent, at least on the Middle East, which the United States has a larger hold over than anyone else right now, as well as the major oil producing countries of the world, like the United States itself, and the multiple other countries like Canada, which are also way up there in terms of oil production. Another thing that happens is that China starts to become heavily economically involved with Venezuela. And once incredibly strong economic connections start to exist between two countries, you generally will see that they pretty much join the exact same sphere of influence. As a matter of fact, it would pretty much be destined at that point that Venezuela would become a satellite state of the People's Republic of China and a minor ally of that sphere. It's incredibly similar to how the United States of America made diehard allies out of Western Europe through our implementation of the Marshall Plans post World War II to invest heavily in those countries and, of course, bring about industrial endeavors and projects that would generate enough of a wealth base in Europe that Europeans would have enough money to buy American products, and we would also be able to see that they would be producing products that Americans would purchase. That's why, historically, and even still in the modern day, Europe and the United States are connected at the hip. There is just so much of an economic incentive there for us to be connected at the hip. No matter what, we will pretty much always end up being allies. Our collective trade is around $1 trillion annually in both imports and exports, and for that reason, that's why we're incredibly big friends. That's the same thing that would happen with Venezuela. If China is buying a load of Venezuelan oil, even if it's high sulfur content, we would assume that China has a way to be able to refine that. Venezuela is also making a great deal of money off of that. They're being paid by the Chinese for the Chinese to be able to extract this oil from their country. This gives Venezuela the money to start growing their economy a little bit, even under Maduro's incompetent management and his government. That means that Venezuela will start to produce goods that China might be able to buy, and that starts a mutual economic spiral upwards, where Venezuela will start to become a larger and more formidable power within the region because of its economic base, and that also means that it could pose a larger threat to the United States of America, and China also has a basing point now for any further expanded spheres of influence operations within South America and Central America. That's
And
generally
also, and also, we have to remember as well that Venezuela does possess the world's largest proven oil reserves. They have estimated about 303 billion barrels as of 2023, which represents about 17% of the entire global oil reserves. So the catch is, though, we've known that since 2023 at least. Everybody's known that. But the problem is, like the enforcer mentioned, it is very high in impurities. It's considered extra heavy crude, which makes the extraction costly, and also it's very complex to refine it. So that's why generally nobody's really bothered tapping it yet, and there has been some efforts to get it, but it just costs so much money to refine it. It's just usually not considered very profitable, at least based on what I've read. So it does have a lot of oil there, but at the same time, though, I would still say that the U.S. really doesn't need that oil, but we're trying to prevent the Chinese from getting their hands on it because we don't want that Chinese influence over here in our hemisphere. Because, like, I see some people pointing out the Monroe Doctrine. I think the Monroe Doctrine was primarily about European expansion into maybe South America, but also I see people trying to drag it over to China as well. I guess you could say it's a form of it, I guess you could say, but yeah, we don't want China down there in South America. This is considered the American sphere of influence, and we don't want China down there, so I'm sure that plays a role.
And I would have to say that the Monroe Doctrine wasn't specifically against Europe. It was created in response to any attempt at European involvement in the Americas, but it generally was about any foreign involvement. It's just that at the time when it was made, nobody in Asia really even existed, at least on our register. Japan was isolationist. The Kingdom of Joseon, which is the modern Koreas, was isolationist. And also the Chinese had just been, well, were about to be forced to open up to the outside world and enter the century of humiliation, at least in the Chinese mind. So we really didn't have to worry about anyone in Asia being consideration or an issue. But nowadays, the Monroe Doctrine would extend to them because it's entirely about curtailing foreign influence inside of the Americas. One thing that I do have to say that is incredibly important for folks to understand is that the United States of America controlling the Americas itself, both North and South America, and ensuring that the powers that be within this region are either neutral or friendly to the United States is an incredibly pertinent and important thing for us to be able to conduct. With that in mind, if this region, the Americas as a whole, remains neutral or friendly to the United States of America, that means that none of our enemies, like China, Russia, or anyone else, are really able to get a foothold right on America's doorstep. This means that if any enemy power wants to conduct an armed action against us, they have to sail by sea thousands of miles to reach the lower 48, which is generally where most of our economic activity and our population is found. That means we're in an incredibly good position defensively. They would have to undertake massive logistical efforts to cross the Atlantic or the Pacific, and most likely under the entire time having to evade U.S. patrols, which would largely attempt to destroy or sink their vessels, to even try and launch minimal attacks against the United States of America. So as far as keeping these regions, these continents, pro-American, or at least benevolent to the United States, and generally not liking them or hating them, that is incredibly important for our strategic interest, really more important than anything else that could be argued at this point. And so I would say that while it is pertinent to ensure that the Maduro regime does not continue to go further down the Chinese fold, at the same time, this might not be the perfect moment to be able to conduct this action because, as we're about to get into once again in Europe, tensions are running at an absolute fever pitch across the entirety of the eastern frontier of NATO. And on top of that, we are seeing that the People's Republic of China may be attempting an armed invasion of Taiwan within the next several years. Both of those things require a great deal of resources and available manpower, and I'm not really sure if we are in the kind of situation at this moment to be able to sacrifice that manpower and supplies in trying to conduct an endeavor against the Venezuelans, at least for now. The Venezuelans clearly will not be in the Chinese influence lock in step for several years still. It will most likely take 5 to 7 years for that to fully coalesce and for those two countries to be connected to the hip in a sense economically. So for that reason, that gives us a little bit of time to focus on greater priorities, like those in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, instead of trying to focus on this, which could be held off for a little while longer, at least for now. But anyways,
Whatever the case is, we'll find out what that authoritarian down there in Venezuela is going to do in probably about 2 more weeks, I'd imagine. So give it 2 weeks, folks. We'll find out. But honestly, though, I think we will know something, though. We can't just keep all those military assets in such large quantities down there in the Caribbean for a very long time. They're going to probably do something on Venezuela. And I'm kind of joking, kind of not joking about that. Probably in the less than 2 weeks time span, I'm guessing we'll see something happen before then. Probably a lot larger of an escalation and simply hitting another drug boat.
I would have to say I think that's most likely going to be the case. It's kind of a little bit funny, folks, because every single time we put on a title on our stream that a U.S. strike against Venezuela is imminent, it has quite literally been prophetic, because literally the next day after those streams, the U.S. would hit a drug boat. So if you ever see a title like that on our stream again, you can assume that there is going to be either another drug boat getting hit, or it might be something even larger, a larger attempted provocation to try and really force the Venezuelans to actually do something against us. But anyways, we have been able to hear in the meantime that apparently the longest range kill in U.S. history with an F-22, or specifically an AIM-120, was conducted by the U.S. Air Force last year in the spring of 2024. According to information that has been published by Raytheon, in the spring of 2024, this aircraft, operating from Eglin Air Force Base in California, managed to strike a target over the Gulf of Mexico at an undisclosed distance, which is said to be the longest range kill ever recorded for the AIM-120. I gotta say, though, that it's a little bit hard to confirm that, because we don't know how far the missile actually went, and we also don't know what it even shot at. Like, for example, there's not really a lot in the Gulf of Mexico that generally is an air target. You know, look down there. There's nothing. Like, I don't know, maybe they shot at a shrimp boat or something, I have no clue, but I don't really know what in the hell they were even firing at. I mean, maybe a cartel plane? I'd have no clue. But this apparently happened in the spring of 2024 in the Gulf of Mexico, and we really don't have a lot more...
It could be those penguins finally pulled up. You know, those penguins that the U.S. Actually sanctioned a while back, like the penguins that were just trying to mind their own business on that little island in remote nowhere, like in the middle of the ocean. They could have finally pulled up to the Gulf of America and was trying to let us have it. So we unleashed the F-22 on them.
I mean, we could have. And also, I just saw someone say something astute, and I actually didn't realize this, and I was reading this, and I was like, Eglin Air Force Base. I think they got that confused, because Eglin, you are correct, to the viewers who are stating this. The Eglin Air Force Base is here north of Fort Walton and Destin, right about here. And it's also this larger training range throughout here. Wherever you see these like little dirt strips, and also this forest around here, that is all undeveloped land that is a part of the Eglin Air Force Base testing range. So that appears to be where it took off from, directly in the Gulf. Because I was thinking, that's a little bit crazy, you know, because if it took off from Edwards Air Force Base, which kind of like auto-filled in my mind, that thing would have had to have flown a pretty damn good distance over the United States alone to get to the Gulf of Mexico. And then it apparently just materialized there, shot an AIM-120, and then flew all the way back. I was like, I'll say that's a little bit odd. So it does appear that it'd be a lot more likely that they misquoted the state, and it would be Eglin Air Force Base inside of the state of Florida, which is right here.
Could be. So, and also, by the way, folks, I say Gulf of America. I'm simply reading off Google Maps and looking at it on my screen share. I see people. I forgot it became political. I forgot all about that. Now the name of the Gulf is political. So now if I say Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, I'm instantly going to create a shitstorm over people going crazy about politics. So that was just reading off Google Maps. It wasn't a political statement. I see people going berserk, but you know, I don't really care what it's called, to be honest with you. I call it either one sometimes, depending on where I see it. So that's basically it.
And also, I see a lot. I don't know why in the world this is the case. I'm going to just break it down for y'all really quickly. I don't fall into this political bullshit with the naming stuff. When I was a kid, Mount McKinley was not Denali. It was Mount McKinley. So it's Mount McKinley to me. Fort Benning wasn't Fort Moore. It was Fort Benning. So it was always Fort Benning to me, even when they named it to Fort Moore. The Gulf of Mexico was the Gulf of Mexico when I was a kid. It's still the Gulf of Mexico, and it has been for hundreds of years. I don't get into this whole goofy political world of we rename things to fit an agenda of some. I don't get into that. It was the Gulf of Mexico. The Persian Gulf is the Persian Gulf, so on and so forth. Whatever it was that I learned when I was a kid, that's what it is to me. Like if you don't like that, I'm sorry, but I just don't get into that thing.
I have set off a firestorm in the chat. I haven't seen the chat move this fast in a minute. This thing's going crazy right now for me saying that. I had no idea, folks. Forgive me. Please forgive me, people. I didn't mean to make the ultimate sin by calling it the Gulf of America. Please forgive me.
I don't even know what to do, folks, because it's like, you know, we call the Persian Gulf, and are people going to go at us because it's now the Arabian Gulf? I don't know. Like, I'll be honest with y'all, I can't really give a damn at this point. It's ridiculous. Like, we're like, whether you call it the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico, I don't really work off the whole thing of what do people want to call it. Like, if it's the Gulf of Mexico, it's the Gulf of Mexico. When I used to go down there to the beach, it was called the Gulf of Mexico. So that's why I'm still calling it. Like, when I heard about Mount McKinley, when I was in elementary school, it was Mount McKinley, was not Denali. And so when they changed the name to Denali, I still called it Mount McKinley. And now they changed it back to Mount McKinley. I don't know what they're doing with that, but it's still Mount McKinley to me no matter what. So, you know, that's what it is. Anyways, With that, it is time for us to move on out of that news. Didn't know that was going to start a whole firestorm there. But anyways, moving on from that and into Washington, D.C., we have also been able to hear some further developments as the Department of Defense has confirmed that they are creating a blueprint for the Golden Dome, at least at the moment. So we finally are getting some news on the Golden Dome, and it appears that it's finally entering its conceptual stage, at least for now. We have still not heard any actual material developments in actually producing and fielding the Golden Dome or any elements of the Golden Dome being fielded at this moment, so it has finally entered a conceptual phase. Just to remind everyone, this was introduced to the public about 8 months ago, and it took 8 months for a concept of what the Golden Dome actually will be to come out. So it's still an incredibly far ways away from ever being introduced, because now they're going to have to try and figure out how to get all of the weapon systems to intercoordinate with each other, how to create a command to operate those systems, stand up new units to man and operate all of these air defenses. And on top of that, they will most likely have to train these forces, which could take years to get them up to full readiness. So this is quite a good ways away. I would be honest with y'all, with the pace that this is going right now, the Golden Dome probably won't be seen until the early 2030s. And also on top of that, considering the exorbitant cost of the system, which is about $500 billion, and the fact that it's probably going to take about 7 years to get it off the ground, by the time that it's put into place, it's probably going to be obsolete, a lot like the old Texas towers that we had off of the coast of New England to be able to detect incoming Soviet bombers. That
And
didn't.
also, by the way, the Golden Dome isn't really designed to shoot down like the drones. You know, like the problem that Europe's having right now. They're trying to build drone defenses against Russian drones. The Golden Dome, I don't believe it was designed to do that. I think it was designed to intercept medium range to long range ballistics. I believe, if I have it correct. So if that's the case, you know, I'm not really sure if that's going to be all effective, because we need something that can also defend against drone swarms. Because in theory, at least, China could pull up a vessel near the coast and they could launch drones right into our country, and we would need something to be able to shoot that down. So if the Golden Dome doesn't cover drones, then that could be an ineffective system from the start.
I would have to say it's probably going to be somewhat effective. It would be hard for anyone to launch drones into America. They would have to be intercontinental, and we haven't seen one of those yet, although they'll probably be developed eventually. But generally, this system is supposed to be able to protect against all threats, at least in the conventional sense, in terms of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, short-range ballistic missiles, intermediate-range ballistic missiles, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. There was also the idea floated around, or at least stated in the public several times, that it was supposed to be able to also defend against hypersonic missiles and everything else. So pretty much it's the anti-everything system, except for the anti-drone system. I don't really think America has to worry about the drone threat, however, considering that they would have to send a drone carrier to the United States, which would most likely be destroyed well before it got here, to be able to conduct a drone attack, at least with the current range that drones have. And also, I have a lot of questions about if a drone would be able to fly several thousand miles under operator control to the United States of America over allied countries like Europe, or, for example, over Canada or the North Pole for that matter, into the United States. Those flight paths would be about 7,000 miles. And considering that it takes about an hour for a single drone to cover about 80 miles at best right now, that would be a monumental flight. That thing would be in the air for well over a week to be able to reach America at its current speeds. So I think that most countries would still prefer to use some sort of a conventional weapon system against the United States, maybe even a hypersonic. And so the system will have a purpose, at least in that degree. But the problem with it, folks, is that it's going to take 7 years to actually get this thing off of the ground. And just
Yeah.
to be straight up with y'all, no defense system that's taken that long that is in the air defense realm has ever succeeded by the time it's actually implemented. There are loads and loads of examples that I can show y'all that just state that this is a bad idea. The Texas Towers is one of them. This was the most expensive defense project that had ever been conceived at the time that it was made. It took them about 10 years to build these things. And to explain to y'all what they were, these were built-in-place structures, kind of like an offshore oil platform, but actually drilled into the rock bed below, off of the coast of New England, to be able to try and detect incoming Soviet bombers that were flying from over the Arctic Circle and down into the major cities here in the Americas. We planned on building 5 of these things, but due to the insanely high costs and the delayed construction times, we cut it down to 3. And I believe it was Texas Towers 2, 3, and 5 that were finally completed, and 1 and 4 were canceled, if I'm not mistaken. These systems, by the time they were introduced, were completely obsolete. The air war had changed, as it naturally does. Air wars evolve rapidly over the years, and for this reason, they were practically obsolete once they were introduced, and they cost a large amount of money. Crazily enough, Texas Tower 3, which you can actually see right here, would end up plunging into the sea, killing all 35 Air Force airmen that were on board the Texas Tower at the time that it went over. It went over in a bad sea state because the actual supports of the structure weren't really embedded into the rock surface at the bottom of the sea too well. So it literally just uprooted itself, flipped over, sank, and killed everyone on board. This is going to be something that I think is quite similar to that of the Golden Dome. And there's also another system that I have to point out to y'all that the British developed earlier in the Cold War that ended up being obsolete immediately as well. I cannot remember the name of this system, the British Missile Defense 1960s. I think this is it. The Bloodhound. That's it. This one right here. Actually, it looks a lot like a KH-31, but a little bit bigger. But these air defense missiles here were considered by Britain to be the future. Britain had this concept about by the late 50s that developing new aircraft was yesteryear's technology. Everything was going to be missile-based in the future. So Britain sacrificed all of their air defense programs, or really air defense companies, like English Electric and so on, and Tempest and Supermarine, so on, to be able to develop this thing. They developed it. It took years to get it off the ground. It had teething issues all over the place. They finally fielded it, and by the time it was fielded, it was completely obsolete because the air war had evolved. These sorts of missiles were no longer able to defend against the threats that they were seeing around the area, and also, for that matter, against intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so, for this reason, the system was the most expensive air defense program that the British had ever undertaken at the time. It took forever to bring it to being, and once it was brought into being, it was already obsolete by the time they were able to field the Bloodhound surface-to-air missile.
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want a repeat of an obsolete system like that. And also, the U.S. has to future-proof that weapon because if it's going to take a long time to build the Golden Dome, and obviously 7 years, if that's the actual time it's going to take to build it, that's a long period of time. Technology is advancing so rapidly these days that 7 years could be like making that system almost completely obsolete by the time it's actually finished if it does take 7 years to build it, because they have to think about multiple different things. China could simply build mothership drones that actually have larger fuel and payload capacities that take smaller drones closer to America, and then they launch them from a mothership. That's a possibility. And also another possibility is they could use container ships to bring drones over to the United States in a covert way, and then launch them out of the back of containers. So they have to think about that. They can't simply ignore it because that could be a huge weakness in that system if it can't handle drone warfare like that. So that's a risk to it. Honestly, like I think that's the risk to building a system that takes that long to build is it's literally possibly going to be obsolete by the time they build it. So it might be better not to invest that much money in that and instead look at a different way to defend or maybe a different strategy because it could be pointless.
I would say that probably the best move that the United States would make if we want to flesh out an air defense program, because I always like to say this on the channel, folks, I'm not completely against an idea as long as it's implemented well. And if we want to implement this plan well, this would be a much better way of doing it. Expand the amount of GMDs that we have. That's a ground-based missile defense system. Those are actually able to intercept ICBMs. Just flesh out that program a great deal more, increase it from 50 interceptors to several hundred, and then just expand the amount of air defense units that we have inside the United States that have Patriot air defense systems to be able to defend against your conventional types of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles that can be fired at the United States. The GMD will catch all else, intermediate range and intercontinental ballistic missiles. Then what we could do is under NORTHCOM command, raise under the U.S. National Guard or the U.S. Army Reserve what is practically the equivalent of Ukrainian territorial defense forces that are once again just the technical-based air defense systems. And later on, we can phase out the technical-based air defense systems, which are just trucks with machine guns, and then bring forward the laser-based air defense systems like the Thor, and possibly integrate those into the regular army, or possibly even the National Guard or the Army Reserve. That's probably the most effective way that we could go about this. That would be cost-efficient and also create a great deal of efficiency rather than the system that we're looking at right now, because considering that it's probably going to take, from what we're hearing, about 7 years to be able to get the system off the ground, it is clearly going to be obsolete by the time it's put into service.
Yeah, I would agree for certain. And by the way, I'm putting up a poll about that actually right now. I'm typing it up.
And so we will see what people are thinking about that as we continue to move through our news. And really quickly, to get y'all a little bit of news out of China, I wanted to show y'all this one in the meantime while we gather all of your thoughts on the Golden Dome defense system. I want to quickly show y'all something that we got out of China today. Many of y'all will know about the Chengdu J-20, and it is an aircraft that has really caught a lot of attention around the world because a lot of people considered the Chengdu J-20 to really be the only comparable stealth aircraft out there that is not American. The Sukhoi Su-57 is a complete and utter disaster because of its construction and due to the fact that it does not use welded seams to be able to join its parts and instead it uses rivets. It's generally considered that the Su-57 has an incredibly large radar cross-section, and as a matter of fact, even according to testing conducted by the Sukhoi company, which developed the Su-57, it turns out that the Su-57 has the same radar cross-section as an F-15, meaning that it's not stealth at all. Now, the J-20 has evaded that over the years, and the People's Republic of China has openly stated that the aircraft is of a sound and incredibly sublime construction due to superior Chinese construction techniques not employed by the Russian Federation, and for this reason, its radar cross-section is incredibly small, similar to that of an F-22 or slightly larger. For the first time ever today, and I do not know why this mistake was made, but we did get incredibly close-up pictures of a Chengdu J-20 inside of China, and we have been able to get something that is truly shocking. It has the same construction techniques employed on the Su-57, in the fact that it uses bolts to hold together the airframe. Now, there is something important to be said about this sort of a construction technique. Usually, when you look at the skin of an F-22 or an F-35, you'll see that it's completely seamless for the large part. It doesn't even have any bolts built into the fuselage. Now, let me see if I can get a close-up of the F-22 skin. Let me see if I can show you all that to give you a little bit of an example of what it looks like. Let's see here. So, let's see, this will be about the best example that I can give. If you notice here on the forward ends of the aircraft, you'll see that there is practically no rivets and everything is incredibly flush. That is because when dealing with radar cross-section, usually things on top of the fuselage don't really get a lot of radar cross-sections, or at least a lot of radar bounce back from them. And for that reason, you'll usually see on most stealth designs, like for example, right about here, you can actually see a little bit of riveting on the upper part of the F-22's fuselage. It's expected that it'd be incredibly rare that the F-22 would be inverted, much like any other aircraft. However, with the Chinese, on the very forward end of the nose cone, you can see a large amount of riveting present. This riveting is present right here around this optical system, which also is a little bit interesting in itself as well, as it's a pretty large glass lens. There's actually several angular ends to this glass lens, and there is no I guess you could say zigzag pattern, that's the best way to explain it, that you would see here on the nose cone, which actually is effective in diffracting radar pulses that are directed towards the aircraft. There is none of that on that optical system. You can actually see it right here. They're incredibly flush edges, and for that reason, these actually will send back a pretty considerable cross-section back towards the radar system. And it's covered in rivets. I mean, everything on this aircraft is covered in exposed rivets. And from what we understand of the construction of the Su-57, which I'll show y'all right here really quickly to give you all a little bit of a comparison here, the Su-57 is also covered in rivets. Literally every single part of the aircraft, including the nose, the wings, the fuselage, and also the upper fuselage section are covered in these open bolts and rivets, much like the J-20. If we are using that as an example, the statements made by the People's Liberation Army in the past saying that this aircraft has an incredibly small radar cross-section are most likely heavily exaggerated, and that this aircraft most likely would be considered at best a low-visibility aircraft and not fully stealth. An American radar system most likely will be able to pick this up, because if we know that Russian S-300 and S-400 radars can pick up an Su-57 as well as an F-15, we could assume that the J-20 would be incredibly similar, and that its radar cross-section could be similar to that of a Rafale operated by the French Air Force. But once again, that's all conjecture at this point, but based off the construction of this aircraft, there's a lot that can be inferred that at this point would be common sense. So the J-20 actually does not look like it is as competent or is as formidable, at least in terms of its stealth capabilities, that has been stated in the past.
I don't know. I would be on the fence about it because, China does have a confirmed radar cross-section testing facility in their country. They built it, I think, back in like 2020 or 2021. They had it finalized, and it's very similar to the ones that we use here in America. But the catch is, though, China has to have our detection systems to be able to test it. What they do is they put these fighter jets on a pedestal, and they basically blast it with radar to detect if they can see it on radar, to test the cross-section. So we do that all the time here in California. I believe it's Lockheed might have a test center out in California for that. So they put like the aircraft on a pedestal out in the middle of the desert, and they blast it with enemy radar, and also they blast it with our own radar to see if it produces a cross-section. So I would assume that China has tested it using our systems. I would assume, but you never really know. They might not have.
They probably did, but the thing is that, like we know, many countries that are generally communist aligned, at least in ideology, are basically, as we can put it, extremist. So they are some sort of an ideological extremist, like a fascist or a communist, usually start to greatly over-exaggerate their abilities, and this is nothing that would have been unseen in other periods of history. The Soviet Union bragged that all of their aircraft were amazing. They could do flips, they could fly at Mach 50, they could shoot down anything, and then it turns out that whenever we captured one of these aircraft, they were terrible in every single way, and it was a miracle they were really flying, and there was a load of safety concerns, a load of operational concerns, and as a matter of fact, a lot of what was stated was completely over-exaggerated, like, for example, everything surrounding the MiG-25, which, when it was made, freaked the United States out so much, that's what led to us to create the F-15, which is still undefeated in air combat to this day, 50 years after it was introduced into U.S. Air Force service. So that is kind of a little bit of something that I do want to point out there, is that just because the Chinese are a country that has testing capabilities doesn't mean that these aircraft are going to be as advanced as ours. And clearly, based off of this, what can be only described as subpar construction, which you would never see to this degree on an American aircraft like an F-35 or an F-22, this thing clearly is sending back a significant radar cross-section. We know that because the Su-57, if I can get y'all a close-up of its skin, and let me see if I can find that somewhere, we can tell that it's not going to have a good radar cross-section. Let me see if I can get a close-up. Like here. The Su-57 has this all over. It's the exact same construction as the J-20, which you can see here. And we know, by the Russians' own accounts, from the Sukhoi company, that Sukhoi stated that in radar testing, this aircraft sent back a radar cross-section that was the same size as an F-15. So we know that the Chinese lie about everything. They lie about their GDP, they lie about their military capabilities, they lie about how stable the country is, they lie about how good the economy is. It's not that much of a stretch to say that they are lying about the stealth capabilities of the J-20, especially considering that a close-up reveals that the J-20 has the exact same construction to it that an Su-57 would, and we already know that the Su-57 isn't stealth at all. That's a publicly known secret at this point, and so I would have to believe that the J-20, if it ever comes in range of the U.S. Navy, will most likely show up on a radar cross-section.
Yeah, it could be. Real quick, Enforcer, go click on the link I sent you in Discord real quick. I want to actually show the people their testing facility right now inside of China that actually tests the radar cross-sections right here. And also, it does show you actually our own, it looks like the F117 on a cross-section testing pylon right there. But you can see, there it is. This is how they do it. This is actually, I believe, when Lockheed was testing the F117, I believe. They put it on a pylon, they'd blast it with radar, and presumably, we would have procured enemy radar systems. So that way we could blast it with the enemy radar and see how it showed up on their systems. So they do this in multiple different locations. I saw some people saying they do it at Edwards. Some people are saying they do it at, some places in Nevada out in the middle of nowhere. But we do it all over the place. And China appears to have one of these test facilities. It appears to be outside of Shanghai, based on what I've learned right here. And also a big shout out to H.I. Sutton, by the way. He's really good with this type of research right here when it comes to China OSINT. But you can see this is their version of that facility right here on the map.
Yeah, well, they might have this facility, but just because they have the facility doesn't mean their aircraft are of a good construction. The Russians have a facility like this, and we know from the war in Ukraine, none of their aircraft are of a good construction. A lot of them are operated quite poorly by their pilots, and not only that, the actual aircraft themselves are incredibly shoddy, and generally are subject to a large deal of errors, faults, or for that matter, are generally susceptible to a great deal of air defense fire because they show up so heavily on air defense systems, radars, and so on. So I'd have to say that just because they have a radar testing facility, which the Russian Federation and every other country on the planet has, it doesn't necessarily mean that the J-20 is a fine aircraft that's perfectly stealth. If anything, this seems to me like a propaganda coup that's been going on for years, like the Russians had with the Su-57. because a lot of people still in the West swear that the Su-57 is 100% stealth. It is a stealth aircraft because it looks like one and it looks cool, and Russia said it was stealth. The government did, so why would they lie about it? Although years later, Sukhoi did come out and publicly say, due to a leak that they weren't supposed to release, or at least from what we know, that this thing actually doesn't have a good cross-section whatsoever.
Yeah, there's no telling. It's a 50-50 chance, but it's not a good sign to see the rivets on the outside of it. I'm not a stealth expert, obviously, but obviously, common sense would tell you it's probably better to have it smooth if you're going for stealth, because any surface that radar can return a signal from or bounce the radar signal back, that allows it to have a cross section. So that would be probably a design flaw right there. And also, the Russians have not had a very good success rate with that. Like, the Russians are probably the closest thing to China that we have to compare with, and their SUs have not been very good at trying to diminish the cross section. So honestly, I would say it's a 50-50 chance.
I would say it's probably the case that these are going to have a very big cross section. On top of that, another thing that I have to point out, we have never seen these things operate outside of China. Anywhere, like at all. They only operate these things inside of Chinese airspace, which is a pretty telltale sign that the cross section can't be that good, because if it was good, they would at least operate them off the coast a little bit, but we have very rarely, if ever, seen them operating off the coast. On top of that, the canards alone on a J-20 seen here, those are going to provide an extreme cross-section because of the flat angles where the canards connect to the fuselage. Like, that in itself, everybody knows at this point, those will definitely show up on a cross-section for sure. And then all the bolts and rivets, which create hard edged surfaces, which I'll show you all once again right there. All of these little rivet and bolt holes in the fuselage skin, those all create sharp surfaces that a radar pulse will be able to bounce back off of towards a radar operator. So this will show it up on a radar cross-section without a doubt. As a matter of fact, this might even be significant enough, a lot like the Su-57, that a radar could pretty much map out every single panel of the aircraft from about 80 to 100 miles away at this point and pick it up pretty easy. Although a computer most likely has not been geared to be able to identify this aircraft off of the bat, it definitely would show up on a cross-section and would show up as an air-identified target. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But that was a fairly shocking thing to see come out of China today, was close-ups of the J-20, because those have never been provided before, and I don't know if they ever will be again. That probably disappeared off of WeChat and everything else in China immediately after it popped up. I don't even know who authorized someone to get that close to the plane to take those kinds of pictures, because that's shocking that they ever would allow that. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the middle of the East and then on into Europe itself. But before we do all of that, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of, well, actually, really quickly, I want some people to talk about the United States having to defend against drones, because we actually asked that question a little while ago, and we had not gotten an answer from all of y'all out there up until now. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so that was the big question. If World War starts, will the U.S. have to defend against enemy drones on the U.S. coast? And it looks like 61% said yes, it will be a real threat to the United States from our adversaries, while 19% said no, we have geographic isolation, and 15% said maybe if technology advances, maybe it might be a threat. And I would say I'm solidly in the 61%. Drones will 100% be a threat to the domestic United States, because there are multiple ways for our adversaries to get them here without just coming, blatantly straight into our country through obvious means. I would say there's a lot of covert ways they could do it. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, they could decide to launch them via shipping containers, and that would be a very covert way to do it, which would be catching us off guard if we weren't ready for that. Also, there's been rumors of a Chinese mothership drone that can carry smaller drones a lot farther distance and then launch them closer to the coast, and then that would obviously catch us off guard as well. So I would say it's definitely a real threat. Geographic isolation in the modern day, that is becoming less of a protection. I'll be perfectly honest with y'all. The technology is advancing so fast, and also the ability to reach farther with these weapons is progressing rapidly. Geographic isolation, it may have been a defense in World War II, but I think it's starting to go by the wayside the further we get into technology. So I'm with the 61%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to go with the 61% as well. I think that drones do pose a significant threat, and that's why earlier I was saying that we need to to change the way that units operate under Northcom's command and try and implement some sort of technical-based air defense unit system throughout the whole of the United States of America for at least home front defense. Because if we do not account for that, that could end up being, like we were talking last night about Europe, an Achilles heel of the United States. We could see that our enemies, like the Chinese or the Russians, attempt to conduct an Operation Spiderweb inside of the United States, meaning that that sort of a threat is a clear and evident threat. Russia didn't think that that was a clear and evident threat. They're paying dividends for that failing still to this day. So it'd be a little bit foolish for the United States to be overconfident and say that we're perfectly fine against drones and have no defense against it here in the United States. That's also why I'm saying, and that's why we were saying earlier, that the Golden Dome system seems to be a great waste of money, because for a system that's clearly going to be obsolete here in the near future by the time it's introduced in the service, couldn't we put all that money towards more effective and also cost-efficient air defense systems that would be able to deal with a myriad of targets, including drones, instead of just dealing with hypersonic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles like it's planned to be? That seems like something that would be a lot more efficient, in my opinion, and also a lot more cost-effective as well. We do have to remember, folks, that while lives are priceless in a sense, money is not infinite, and we do have to find a way to be cost efficient in dealing with our enemies, because if we are not cost efficient, then we are going to lose a war simply due to economic excess or spending excess, which clearly is a fault and a major issue, because we've seen that the Russian Federation has been losing their war because of cost excess against the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians have been emphasizing a very lean and cheap sort of an operational system that is not only incredibly effective at mitigating their casualties, but is also incredibly effective at maximizing Russian casualties at the exact same time. We need to emphasize a similar sort of a system in our air defense. Otherwise, we're going to end up a lot like the Russian Federation in the war in Ukraine. It's fairly clear that we would. But also, I've seen that some people have been talking about all kinds of interesting stuff, all kinds of incredibly interesting stuff in the chat. And I do want to make sure that we have a little bit of a moment before we move into the Middle East and Europe to talk about, also, by the way, you know what? Actually, I just remembered what I was wanting to say here really quickly before we got into the question segment. I want to make sure that we put this on the record, folks. I have to make sure that we put this on the record. We have to, like, very rarely do we ever openly say on the channel that there was an enforcer was right moment, because last night we were talking up and down about how Europe is not prepared to deal with drone attacks from Russia. There were plenty of people who were pushing back against that idea and saying that Europe is definitely 100% capable, along with America, of shooting down Russian drones. Russia is completely harmless in every way. They never pose a threat. In fact, there's a load of secret systems that nobody knows about that are just fielded in mass at this moment that defend Europe against incoming drone attacks. We have to put this out there because this literally came out just about, I think it was like, what, 20 minutes, Mandy, before the show came out, into the Enforcer Was Right jar. So want to make sure to put this out there because this is something that we can't really miss. It wasn't put on our map. But here is the statement that was made by the European Union overnight. The EU is rushing to spend billions on setting up a drone wall with technology that has been battle-tested in Ukraine. Hours after NATO jets shot down a few of the estimated 19 drones that entered Poland's airspace, Ursula von der Leyen said Europe had to build a drone wall on its eastern border, meaning one does not exist right now, and they're working on one. The EU will also set up a drone alliance with Ukraine, backed by 6 billion euros in financing, to transform Ukrainian ingenuity into battlefield advantage and into joint industrialization, according to Ursula von der Leyen.
Sounds like the EU thinks that they're not really ready to handle the drone situation from Russia. It seems like almost what we were saying last night. And also, folks, it was like a very small handful of people saying that we were wrong on that. I think most people, even last night, even before the story came out, understood that obviously Poland was not able to handle the drones very well, and they had to shoot it down using F-16s, which was very ineffective, that it was a problem. But we got official confirmation. They're building a drone wall urgently, trying to scrap together this drone wall to defend against that. They're behind the curve, though, but at least they're jumping on it now. Hopefully they're in time.
But I wanted to point that out, folks, because for some reason there's always folks who want to say that our analysis isn't well researched or we don't know what we're talking about. And there were actually a decent amount of people last night, we deal with this on everything, that always say the enforcers have no clue what they're talking about, they haven't researched this well enough, they're stupid, and therefore this whole thing is moot. And I always find that a little funny, not because it's offensive, but because we do this for a living. We live and breathe this every day. And then, someone reads like a quick article, like a headline or something, and then they want to tell us that we're wrong. And it's clearly obvious that we're not. Ursula von der Leyen literally said just a day after we brought that up that Europe is not prepared and they're rushing to build a drone wall in that area to try and protect against a drone attack because they have no way to defend against it right now. That's exactly what's being said. So, once again, the enforcers are right on the analysis side of things. I don't mean to toot our own horn, but if we don't, no one else will. And at least on that one, which was fairly contentious last night for some people, once again, we were dead on the nail. There's really no way that Europe has, or the United States in the area right now, of defending against drones on a massive scale.
100%, and Europe has to build that wall. Whoa! Wait a minute! I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Europe has
to build that drone wall. The drone wall just got 100 feet taller. Oh my God! It comes full circle.
I gotta be honest with you. Everybody was saying, "Don't build a wall. Don't build a wall." I was a visionary. It wasn't made of brick. It was made of guns and spotlights. And a lot of spotlights. People were going, "Wow, that's a lot of spotlights." But beyond that, it is time for us to get on into some questions, at least for a brief moment, and then move on into the rest of our news. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our super chat questions, our three first ones, and then right back into the news. Our first one here goes to Bobby43, and thank you very much, Bobby, also known as LC39A, for throwing in that $150 support, and we appreciate that very, very much. And Bobby said, "Here we go, Matt, here we go."
And here we go indeed, Bobby43. And I gotta say that it's an interesting time for sure. A historical time, without a doubt. And I have to thank you massively for support, Bobby, and helping this channel to keep running. Because you're helping us to make sure that we keep covering the news while they're going. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. Because,
I'm sorry. I was laughing so hard here. Go ahead and finish what you were saying, though, and I'll tell you what I was laughing at.
I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Bobby43, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling for years and continuing to keep it rolling well into the future to keep covering news like we do every night. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And also, Matthew, what were you busting out laughing at right there?
So people are saying that Europe has to build that wall and Europe's going to make Russia pay for it. Honestly, they could technically liquidate the Russian frozen assets and use that to pay for the drone wall. They could technically do that. But technically, though, those are earmarked for Ukraine to rebuild their country when the war is over. But at the same time, though, it may be prudent, since it looks like a world war might be about to start soon, that we maybe use those funds to develop European defenses, because Europe's defense and Ukraine's defense is kind of one and the same at this point, in my personal opinion. So I would say so, to be honest with you. That could be a real deal. They could make Russia pay for it.
I'd have to say they probably could. Like, you technically could make them pay for it. And I got to be honest with you, that's not a bad idea. We're going to make Russia pay for the wall. We're going to build a big, beautiful drone wall. Make drone walls great again. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. People have been saying that, some people keep droning on about this whole issue. They go, sir, people won't stop complaining about drones. And I go, what is up with these drones? People used to say, bing, bing, bong, bong, hit some guy in the Middle East like Soleimani at Baghdad, and everyone went, oh, drones are great. But now that there's like hundreds of millions of them and there's really no way to shoot them down, everyone's getting really scared. And I go, why in the world are they scared? They shouldn't be scared. Like, really, honestly, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's really incredible. I mean, I sent our top guy over there, Witkoff, and the Russians said to him that drones are harmless. They get them from Timu. That's kind of weird, though. That's Chinese, but they technically aren't involved in the war. But they get them from Timu, and they send them out there into Europe. Crazy thing. The Polish thing.
What if they paint the drone wall black? Like they did like the little the border gate fence thing, for the United States. They painted it black. In theory, it's supposed to get hotter and it's harder to grab onto the wall because it's going to burn your hands because the sun heats it up. I'm not sure if that's actually the way it works in practice or not. I've heard obviously that the color black attracts like heat, so that way it gets hotter quicker. But I would be done at that point, man. I'd be like, come on, man. Like, this is like such a parallel between that wall and this wall. I just can't take it.
I gotta be honest with you. I say that the best idea for a drone wall in Europe is just give a whole bunch of guys fly swatters and watch what happens. Let's see what happens. I'm just kidding, by the way. We actually do need an effective drone defense, though, over there. It's incredibly important. So, anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. But a huge thanks to you for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, Bobby43, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second to our third super chat here. This one goes to Frostbit Jenna, last name Tolls. They suddenly they've gotten cold out here, but thank you very much for that $20 support right there. They said, "I guess I have a serious question for once. Any concern that Venezuela has been supplied with nuclear weapons?"
I would say no. I don't think that they have been supplied with nuclear weapons. If we wanted to know if they were, we could send a nuke sniffer down there and they would be able to figure that out. But generally, from what we would know, there's no nuclear weapons inside of Venezuela. And I would say that the chances of that happening is incredibly slim. It's not really the era of the Cuban Missile Crisis where they have to move nuclear weapons closer to the United States for them to really be within quick striking range. The Russians can fire intercontinental ballistic missiles at us, and that generally negated the need to be able to base nuclear weapons outside of the tactical level in foreign-based countries. So I would highly doubt that there would be any nuclear weapons in Venezuela, because they're pretty much able to get the exact same threat levied at the United States just by the intercontinental ballistic missiles based inside of Russia alone. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, but I would say that the chances of nuclear weapons being in Venezuela is insanely low. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
And our last one here goes to Matthew Mardrosians. And thank you very much, Matthew, for that $20 support right there. And we do appreciate that very much. And I think that might be one of your first ever supports on the channel. So thank you very much for choosing to support our work and help to keep us on the air. And we do appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you massively for supporting this channel and helping it keep on running. You're helping us to keep this thing rolling and keep it turning. We're burning and turning is what they used to say about those, I think it was the B-36. That was one hell of a plane. I bet a lot of people don't know about that one. The B-36 Peacemaker. Look at that bad boy right there. 6 burning and 4 turning. These things were unbelievably large. Let's see here. Here's one compared to a B-29, just to give you a little bit of a size comparison. Very large aircraft, but you are one of the folks who helps the Elite Spring Army to keep burning and turning, a lot like these old B-36 Peacemakers. These things certainly did keep the peace, I'll tell you that. But beyond that, a massive thanks to you so much, and I got to thank you for enjoying this channel enough that you'd want to support it. You didn't throw in a comment, but we are massively appreciative of your support because it helps us to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. Also, by the way, really quickly, just to tell y'all a fun fact about these B-36s right here. Did you know, Matthew, that there were actually 2 pressurized compartments in a B-36, one at the aft end of the aircraft and one up here at the cockpit, and to be able to travel between the two, there was a little tunnel that they made through the plane, and you had to lay down on pretty much a stretcher and grab a rope and pull yourself through it to get from one pressurized compartment to the next.
Wow, that sounds tough right there.
Oh, yeah, it was tough. B-36 tunnel. Let me see if I can show this to y'all. Oh, yeah, here's the tunnel. So they were on a little stretcher with wheels, and they'd have to grab onto this rope and then carry themselves from this pressurized compartment back here all the way up here. And there's the little tunnel right there in white that they would have to drag themselves through. Now, a pilot could actually help them out with this, funnily enough. They could just pull up or pull down on the stick, and pretty much gravity would do the job for them. They just literally roll down the tube. But, if you did that a little bit too quick, they go too fast, in either direction. They could end up not really that well. But that was how they would get from one compartment to the next. Everything in between the cockpit and this rear compartment was actually a bomb bay. But then later on, the B-36 really didn't use the whole bomb bay because, intercontinental ballistic missiles were developed. So then it only started to carry smaller tactical bombs, which then the B-36 was just pretty much obsolete at that point, and they retired it. But anyways, fun little rabbit hole.
It looks like the Russians trying to get through their petroleum pipes. You know how they're trying to like sneak into the Ukrainian territory through that? It literally looks like they're doing that in the aircraft. Like it looks identical. They got a sled and everything.
Dude, the Russian simulator 2024 is getting that tube.
It's a lot safer.
Man, honestly, they have like the little trolleys and everything too, like where they have the stretchers on wheels and they use them to travel through the pipe. They are in that pipe though, crazily enough, near Kupiansk for 4 days straight before they come out the other side. Did you know that?
I didn't know it was 4 days straight. That's probably explaining why they're, asphyxiating and stuff in there is because they're in there for so long.
Honestly, like it's absolutely crazy. Also, another cool plane that's in this picture right here is the F-89 Scorpion. I'll put this one up on air really quickly. We have to get back to our news, but this one was wild. Some people call it the rat in the modern day because it has like a nose like a rat. But this thing was wild because it either was equipped with 4 20mm Hispanos, or it was equipped with these large booms on the wingtips, which carried unguided rockets. These things were incredibly bizarre and didn't really have a long service life, but they were quite interesting. This was the early age of jet technology when they were trying to figure out what in the world jet aircraft would do, and this was one of the wacky designs that we came up with here in America in that earlier age of jet design. But anyways, moving on from that, a big thanks to you so much for the support. Help this channel to keep on running. And of course, you didn't throw in a comment, but I hope that we threw in a cool rabbit hole as a bonus point to your super chat. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on to the second segment of this news and cover the rest of what we have for the night before we get back into the question segment. And so, moving us on into the Middle East and going through a couple of quick updates, we were able to hear that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have signed a mutual defense pact, meaning that an attack on one is an attack on both. We also were able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran today has stated they will be making no concessions to the European Union and expects UN sanctions to be reimposed on Iran. Iranian officials did state that Iran will retaliate when the sanctions are imposed. We don't know what that means at the moment, but it's quite clear that that'll most likely mean terrorist activities. We also were able to hear that there was an explosion near to the Aleppo airport today, but we will not be able to show that clip in full. We'll just be able to show you all that little clip of it right there. So, interesting. We don't know what that explosion was, but quite interesting nonetheless. Moving on out of that, however, and on into Europe, it's time for us to get on into the big headline that came out of Europe today, as we were able to hear that the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, aka the horseface right here, who is chewing on a sugar cube or a salt block right now, did state that Western troops entering Ukraine would be considered occupiers and legitimate targets. According to Sergei Lavrov, he stated that if peacekeepers were brought into Ukraine to help defend them from the Russians, they would be considered occupiers by the Russian Federation. He also insisted that the Russian army never strikes civilians and never has and never will. And that on top of that, they are looking out for the Ukrainians. They love the Ukrainian people, although they admit that they don't exist as a people or they're, inferior to the Russians, one or the other. They still love the Ukrainians somehow, and that they only want the best for them. We have been able to hear that after this, Putin put some horse tack on this guy and rode him. So we don't really know how credible his knowledge is on the matter, but we'll have to see. That honestly went really cruel. Like that was really wild. That was a really wild one. We'll see how people react to that in the chat. Beyond that, we also were able to hear that Putin's ally Dmitry Kozak has resigned today, according to RBC inside the Russian Federation. And according to some insider sources, he was generally against the war in Ukraine and heavily tried to dissuade Putin from starting the war back in 2022, and also from encourage negotiations with Ukraine in this year. Apparently, he's resigned because he and Putin are no longer seeing eye to eye, and that is a very unfortunate thing to hear because he was actually a proponent of ending the war inside of Russia's government. Outside of that, in Yekaterinburg, we were able to hear that a railway junction was paralyzed today by Ukrainian partisan attacks by the Atesh agents, who were apparently able to take out some key signal boxes in a rail yard in Yekaterinburg, which has been used as an artery between the two ends of the Russian Federation. These are all the signal boxes that were hit, marked with the X's, which pretty much are all of the eastern corridors, or generally the western corridors, out of Yekaterinburg and on into the rest of the Russian Federation. This is pretty much the only rail artery within this area of Russia that travels east to west, so this is actually some incredibly important damage that was caused by the Atesh unit. Moving on out of that, and on into the rest of the news in the Russian Federation, we also were able to confirm that there are more gas shortages popping up throughout Russia. People are going to social media to show that the gas is all out. Even diesel nearly is out. The price of diesel is also rising pretty quickly, so that's the reason why we're believing that diesel is starting to run out as well.
Так, бензина 95-92 нет, дизтопливо 67-90. Сормовский район...
You know a crackdown's got to be coming on those because the videos popping up all over Russian social media, these videos are becoming by the thousands now. Like the Russians are making tons of these videos like those and showing the crisis. And obviously the Kremlin wants to control the information sphere heavily. Like that's their whole deal, is trying to like tamp down any of the fears the Russian people are having. I would not be surprised to see a very, very harsh crackdown on social media to try to tamp this thing down, because right now the Russians are, really the Russians usually don't do this in such large numbers, showing footage like this. They know it's dangerous, that Putin's going to come after them, but it seems like they're getting so frustrated with it, they're kind of putting caution to the wind.
Yeah, I would have to say, also, man, why did the guy in that clip sound like Lukashenko? He's like, it's like, why is he talking like that? But also, this is a news clip from Russia that's actually from a news agency in a local town that is showing that the Kassa gas station is also out of gas. Also, what does that poster say? This says Ukulok Potrivteri. Poltravteri. I don't know what that means. If anyone actually understands Russian, let me know. I just don't understand this language of this Russian world, this Ruski mir. But you can see here, once again, that 92 and 95 grade fuels are completely out. No fuel. Moving on from that, and on into the rest of the Russian Federation, we also were able to hear that the Ukrainians hit a little Russian ammunition depot in Bryansk. Look at them flying on in. Oh, and there's a Rodnik section right there that we just passed by. Look at that. That truck. That thing is in bad shape. Now they're flying over the net. And on through. They're just taking a little perusing at what they can hit. And this dirt bike is the prime target. Bink! And they got it. Now we can see a little Ural. That's not really a little Ural. Urals are kind of big. But they're about to turn it into a urinal. An open-air burning urinal. And there they go. Hitting it right on the side passenger door. And cooking that thing on up like chop suey. Also, it appears that a tree is now fallen in the back in the meantime. Call the Russians loggers, because they be getting those logs in the back of those trucks somehow, some way. Oh! Oh! And they got the ammo! Like, oh my god, that was one hell of an explosion. And there it is from a distance. Honestly, that caught me off guard, folks. The drone just kind of took like a dip into that little bunker to the right of the truck. Turns out there was loads of 152mm high explosive shells in there, and it sent the whole thing up. Нет, еще. Вот так-то. Оп, твою мать. Oh, and hello there, Rob Iceman. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome, Rob.
And moving on from that clip, and further on down the line, oh, by the way, I forgot to cover all those things that happen in Europe. Oh, oopsie daisy. Let me make sure to knock those out. We have a lot going on inside of Europe. We were able to confirm that another drone has been found in the Lublin area, this one time around the village of Stanislavka in the Lublin Voivodeship. According to an RMF FM report in Poland. The polyester drone got stuck in the trees after falling in the forest. They are now investigating the crash site and trying to figure out what this is, where it came from, it's Russian, and everything else in between to confirm it. So, also, by the way, if y'all are wondering, what the hell is a voivodeship? Well, a voivod is pretty much like a leader in a sense, or kind of like a leader of a group. So a voivodeship, at least in terms of the Polish sense or the Eastern European sense, is kind of the equivalent of a county in a sense. So that's what the Lublin voivodeship is, just in case y'all are wondering what the hell that word meant. Anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to confirm that the Polish have tested out their first Patriots today. Look at the test. Success. Grand success.
Look at that Patriot. It's so loyal.
Oh, say, can you see? Anyways, moving on from that and on into Warsaw, we also got to confirm that a Ukrainian was deported after a 21-year-old Ukrainian apparently flew the drone over the Warsaw government district. This pissed off the Polish enough, considering the tense situation. They told the boy to go packing home, and he's going back to Ukraine. So, so a little interesting with that. And with that, we are going to be moving on from that. A little bit of news, a little bit of a weird turn in events on that story. And we also were able to hear that the Lithuanians apparently foiled a great deal of Russian assassination plots or terrorist attacks throughout Europe, as they were able to uncover homemade incendiary devices that were sent via package to the United Kingdom, Poland, and Germany. 15 suspects from multiple countries were charged, and the investigation is still ongoing inside the country. On top of that, Latvia captured a Russian spy today who was gathering information on the construction of new military bases and NATO troop locations inside the country. Clearly, this is something that a Russian would do. Beyond that, however, a lot of people are talking about what's going to be going on in the larger part, as Russia continues to launch that covert hybrid war against NATO, and pretty much everyone is on the same page that it's a state of war at this point. It's just that nobody's really shooting at each other directly yet. But nevertheless, Matthew, what are a lot of people thinking is going to be coming next, or when it more so becomes a full-blown war? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So, by the way, folks, I couldn't put this in the poll question because it took up too many characters, but a true actual war between Russia and Europe would basically be the declaration of Article 5. That would be a real war in my definition. So, that's what we're referring to. But the big question is, when does it become an actual war? And it looks like 38% said when Russia launches a missile attack on NATO, and 35% said when Russia launches a ground attack. About 18% said when Russia strikes U.S. forces in Europe, and 10% said when Russia declares war themselves. And I would say, unfortunately, I don't think a missile attack on NATO by Russia would actually trigger a real Article 5 declaration. I think NATO would try to overlook that, kind of like we did the drone attack, unless it hits civilians. But even at that, though, NATO is taking such a weak approach right now. I'm really not sure if that would trigger Article 5, even at that. So I would say if Russia launched a ground attack, that would obviously probably invoke Article 5. Or if Russia struck U.S. forces, that would instantly trigger Article 5 because the U.S. Does not take any crap when it comes to that. And if our forces got hit, that would pretty much send us right into it. So either one of those, I would say. But Enforcer, what do you say?
I would have to say that I would believe that I would have to be with a 37 to 38%. I think that missile attacks would pretty much be the opening of a war because true on missile attacks will most likely proceed by only a few hours of ground invasion. So whether or not they wanted to admit that the missiles were an act of war, they're most likely going to have to end up treating them like that because the ground invasion would follow right after. So I generally would say that I would be with a 38% that it would be a missile attack because the Russians are not going to conduct a missile attack and then not follow that up immediately with a ground invasion. So they'll have to treat both of them as a one and done sort of a situation, the same thing in total. So the missile attack would be the actual justification for war, the timeline of events being considered, at least in my opinion. But with that, we are moving on into the rest of the news that we have from inside of Ukraine today, which we have a pretty decent amount of. Moving us on into our location unknowns, first and foremost, we were able to hear that apparently some Russians were able to capture a Bradley. This is something that isn't really new. They've done this a couple of times. But the Russians' comments while in the Bradley were very intuitive to the intelligence of the Russians. Let's take a look.
Вот так вот выглядит натовская шляпа, блядь.
NATO crap F-sake.
Брэдлик.
Bradley.
Слышь, чё?
Can you hear me?
А мне интересно, как...
I'm
охуеть,
curious how the
охуеть,
Ukrainians are
если здесь
driving
всё,
them
сука, по-английски, блядь.
if everything here is written in English. Damn. Man, this guy doesn't even consider learning a new language to be in his realm of possibilities. He's like, how the hell did they know? Like, it's like maybe they learned English?
And also, how's he bashing the Bradley when the Russians are pulling stuff out of the museum that haven't been used like in like 100 years or something? It's like they're pulling stuff out of the museum, man. It's like they can't be bashing our Bradleys.
Dude, this guy's sitting there shitting on this when they're riding into battle either in this piece of shit, the MTLB, or they're taking a dirt bike. It's like, I don't really think you can diss on a Bradley, man. It's like, he's like, NATO shit. It's like, bruh, have you seen what y'all are coming into war in? Better yet, do they have a picture of the interior of these little things, these terribly ugly things?
Man,
oh, wait a minute.
That Russian right there is the type to jump in a Ferrari and be like, this piece of shit is not fit for a dog.
Honestly, let's see, interior. Can I show y'all the interior of one of these little MTLBs? Ah, here we go. Yeah, I can. That's the interior of an MTLB. So he's saying that a Bradley's garbage, that's their most common APC these days, if they have any at all. That's what the inside of it looks like. You literally are sitting down hunched over in that thing because it's so small. And he's dissing on a Bradley. This guy is clearly stupid. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a rare return of the Rudniks segment. And this time with a tank. Oh!
Oh no!
They built a roof on it.
It's the rolling Mad Max prop.
Honestly, they built a freaking roof on that thing, dude. Look, it's like actually angled.
Yeah, that's hideous, man. It looks like a rolling junkyard. Like, isn't this where Sanford and Son used to like live out of? Something like this right here.
Honestly, man, they probably did. That was rough. But anyways, speaking of rough, the Russian casualty reports, they weren't really the greatest thing that we've seen. And Miss DSIC, Keeper of the Records, did confirm the 360 drones lost is the fourth highest daily loss of the war. First time in 31 days the troop losses are over 1,000, meaning that this was quite a good day, and major categories are far over the 7-day average. And we were able to hear that over the past 24 hours, 1,020 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 3 APCs, 108 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 36 artillery pieces, 360 drones. And generally, it was a fairly good day overall. Moving on out of our location unknowns and on into the front lines themselves, we were able to see that the Petardier crews of Vovchansk were still hard at work in the 57th Motorized Rifle Regiment and making sure to target and destroy those Russian forces, wherever they may be found. They're playing that Minecraft techno music from the early 2010s.
Also, I hope you old-timers appreciate the Sanford and Son reference right there, because believe it or not, that show was before my time, but I have watched quite a bit of it. It was actually quite good, actually. It wasn't too bad. A little bit repetitive, but it was funny.
Oh, and there goes the mine. Oh!
Oh!
Here goes another. Right into the hole. Actually, that one's sitting on top of that mound right there. And it's gone. You know, folks, I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of getting some deja vu from this clip. I swear that we've seen it before. You know, it didn't give me that hint of deja vu until I just said it was on the mound, and something's reminding me, and I feel like we've seen this clip before.
I don't know. Like, I don't think we've seen it before. I don't recognize it.
I don't know. Well, we'll have to see. I wonder if people are going to be saying this is an old clip or not.
I'm not a big fan of this choke collar they put on this, like, rabid-looking thing on the screen right here, whatever that is, like a wolf or a tiger or something. I don't know what that is, but, you know, choke collar, come on, man. Like, it doesn't need that.
I don't know if that wolf is hard. I mean, it's wearing a choker, you know? like how hard can it be?
Man, I tell you, that dog right there, that wolf, I tell you what, he's got that dog in him.
Man, I see some people saying that we did see this before, so we will be moving on from the clip. But moving on out of Vovchansk and getting rid of that since it's apparently a duplicate of yesteryear, moving on down from that and into Kupiansk, we have been able to get some unfortunate news out of Kupiansk that the Russian pipeline breakthrough is apparently gaining some ground, and some Russian forces have started to enter the northern part of the city of Kupiansk as of today. We do understand that Ukrainian resistance is apparently strengthening as they're making it into the northern area of the town, but this is starting to show that the Russians have crossed over the river and are starting to battle directly for the city of Kupiansk itself. We don't really know how that battle is going to turn out, and we also do not know the condition of the Ukrainian forces or active reserves that could be pulled into the area by the Ukrainian armed forces at the moment. Moving on from that, however, and all the way down the line and into the Toretsk front, we were able to see that the Russians were getting blown up inside of Toretsk. We actually
another junkyard van tank looking thing, just terrible.
Man, I actually heard that there was some reports coming out of Tourette's today, and they were not, they were pretty decent actually. They were pretty decent. I'll leave it there. That was a build up for a joke, and I was like, I don't really know if I can actually deliver that joke well enough to get some laughs, and I was like, I'm just gonna drop it. But we can see them absolutely slamming some Russians around here. Take a look at this.
I look like a snowmobile.
I think those are those Chinese ATVs, you know, like those little Desert Cross ones.
That was a janky-looking motorcycle right here they got laying down. There's like the motorcycles they're using are getting jankier and jankier as the war goes on. Like they're having to buy the like lower models each time.
Bro, they probably are. You know, there's a lot of these, I'll assume, that, well, then again, KTM isn't in Russia. And since they went bankrupt, I was like, you know, I bet you a lot of those are going to be out there. Because...
Oh, no, they're not bankrupt. KTM's good to go. They got a little bit of an infusion of cash. They're rolling again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they got saved.
Dude, that's good to hear. They were a good brand. I was ashamed to hear that they were going to go. But anyways, moving on from that, head into the area of Novotoretsk. We also were able to see the 4th Brigade of the Rubish clearing out some Russians.
Oh, sneaky bastards.
They almost got us. They almost got us.
Right in the middle of the footage, too. Like, who starts music right in the middle like that?
Bro, I hit that church bell, and I immediately hit that mute. I was like, I was like, we ain't getting caught today, son. Not today. Not today. But we also got to see this ammunition depot getting hit around the occupied city of Donetsk.
Опять хлопок где-то.
Oh, what's that? It's a faint little noise.
И вон вижу, дым пошел. Сторона Таймырки. Сейчас солнце светит, ничего не вижу. И дым пошел конкретный. Очень конкретный.
Oh, That's quite a large explosion off in the distance right there. Оп твою мать! Вот тогда, бля!
Это я не знаю, где-то за Таймыркой, может 16-е. Пипец.
The smoke does rise. It rises and rises. О, тогда.
Что-то часто там взрывается. Такое ощущение, что это склад БК горит.
It's kind of peaceful out here on the front lines. Nice trees, little wind, little breeze, little bird chirping in the background. Could be a pterodactyl.
Clear military aviation activities that happened overhead at some point. We don't know when. Had to have been recent.
Some say chemtrails, but of course they don't use their brain on this right here.
And most people don't. But moving on from that. Moving on from that and down into the southern front, we also got to see Buke 2 getting slammed. A Buke M2, technically. Why is it a Buke M2? Well, you can tell because the Buke M2 has a nice rack of 4 air-to-air, well, surface-to-air missiles that you can see overhead. A Buke M3 is different in that it has 6 internally enclosed surface-to-air missile cells on the top of the turret. You can clearly tell them apart when you see them normally.
Also, Cody Fritz said, yeah, I was going to say some chemtrails right there. Also, by the way, for the record, I don't believe in the chemtrail thing, just to make that clear. I'm sure that'll start a Gulf of America thing here in a minute. But I'm like the mind, I'm like the hive mind of the people. I know what the people are thinking. I'm in tune with the people. Some say I know the people better than anybody. That's what they're telling me. But, all I know is, I just know what the people are saying. It's just the facts.
I got to say, man, it's a crazy thing what people will believe, I don't know if people know this, but the air up there is like really, really cold. So a hot jet engine creates steam, and that's what that is. It's like a vapor of steam behind the jet engine because the water vapors have been superheated, and then they get back out there into that extremely cold air, so they turn into steam or condensation, which is what you're seeing. That's what it is. But anyways, we also get to see the Russians are building a road to Mariupol. The reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to increase their logistical capacity, and considering that railroad corridors seem to be somewhat weaker these days due to Ukrainian attacks, they're trying to get a fail-safe by creating a truck head, not a railhead, funnily enough, inside of Mariupol. So they are constructing a large highway project within the area, and we do not know when it's going to be completed, but this does clearly show that the Russians are expecting the war to go on quite a good deal farther, because they're building a highway in the middle of the war. That generally shows you they're not expecting this to end soon. Meanwhile, in Bryansk, we were also able to confirm once again that the fuel supplies are running out. Take a little look at this. You see these Ukrainian ladies here inside the city of Bryansk driving to the gas station.
This is a daily vlog.
Есть программа «Угадай мелодию», а у нас «Угадай колонку». С бензином. Да. Сейчас будем карту разложим.
You said these are Ukrainian women?
Yeah, in Bryansk.
А что у нас здесь?
Okay.
And they're out of gas. Everything, actually. And they're all out of everything but... Well, actually, I can't tell you. It's diesel, so they only have diesel. Everything else is out. So in Bryansk, all the gas stations are out of gas again. So pretty much all the occupied territories in a large part of Western Russia and also the Far East are out of gas. So pretty much most of the country at this point is suffering with chronic gas shortages. Not a really good position to be in. Anyways, moving on from that, it's time for us to get to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. I had to do a little bit of sleuthing to find this thing, and honestly, it's more of like a press meeting of a sort than anything, but this is the closest thing that we have. We will be making sure to get y'all this wonderful speech. So let me go and get y'all some Ukrainian auto-generated to English. That's what we want. So without further ado, folks, here is the speech. Peach!
Роберто, дуже радий вашому візиту. Ви завжди у нас дуже бажаний гість, пані президенте. Шановні журналісти, сьогодні ми дійсно дуже раді бачити в Україні з візитом пані президентку Європарламенту. Це вже 4-й візит Роберти Мецоли в Україну під час війни. Роберта була серед перших, хто відвідав Україну після початку вторгнення. Загалом Європарламент та пані президентка завжди послідовно підтримують нашу державу, нашу незалежність, наш суверенітет і наших людей, безумовно. Я хочу за це подякувати, Роберта, тобі особисто за твою таку велику увагу до України. Ми однаково сприймаємо ситуацію зараз. Захист України – це захист Європи. Допомога Україні – це допомога Європі. Росія завжди ставилась з презирством до об'єднаної Європи. Росія ніколи не вірила, що саме Європа може бути сильною. І цими роками разом з усією командою Європи, з багатьма європейськими лідерами ми довели, що Росія точно помилялась в такому ставленні до Європи і до європейців. Важливо, що Україна тільки додає Європі єдності, сили, впливу на глобальні справи. Зараз ми бачимо, як перебудовуються відносини між Європою та Сполученими Штатами Америки, як Європа вибудовує свою нову позицію у глобальних справах. Важливо, щоб і надалі Європа залишалась глобальним суб'єктом, глобальним захисником свободи і людських прав. Ми це забезпечимо всі разом, я в цьому впевнений. Сьогодні ми з Робертою обговорили ключові теми, які є між Україною та європейськими інституціями. Вдячні за підтримку перемовин щодо вступу України в Європейський Союз. Ми робимо те, що обіцяли. І зі свого боку ми дуже розраховуємо, що Європейський Союз, лідери Європи будуть виконувати свою частину роботи, те, що стосується саме кластерів. Ми розраховуємо на відкриття першого кластеру якнайшвидше та одноголосну підтримку цього рішення всіма державами-членами Євросоюзу. І дякую за те, що Європарламент принципово нас в цьому підтримує. Також цінуємо, що в Україні запрацює Офіс Європейського парламенту. Це посилить координацію між нашими парламентами, парламентом України і Європарламентом. Важливо, що Європарламент завжди послідовно підтримує санкції проти Росії за цю війну. І дійсно багато значить лідерство Європи у відповідних питаннях. Ми очікуємо на прийняття 19-го пакету санкцій Євросоюзу. Ми розраховуємо, що однією з основних мішеней санкцій будуть саме російські енергоресурси та інфраструктура торгівлі ними, але також і російський банківський сектор та різноманітні схеми обходу санкцій, які використовує Росія для фінансування війни. Предметно обговорили, як надати більше європейськості позиціям Словаччини та Угорщини, які поки що мають певну залежність в енергетиці від Росії. Ми розраховуємо і на відповідні санкційні кроки Сполучених Штатів Америки. Путін має відчути, що його намір продовжувати війну, продовжувати удари, зокрема переносити дестабілізаційну активність на такі країни, як Польща, Румунія, що все це буде означати біль для Росії. Якщо Росії не боляче, вона воює. Вони повинні відчувати більші економічні, більше політичні і інші втрати, щоб ми нарешті змогли наблизитись до миру. В цьому контексті говорили і про російські активи, які мають значно ефективніше і оперативно допомагати захисту від російської агресії та відбудові України. Говорили також і про такі безперечно вагомі соціальні речі для нашої стійкості, як будівництво укриттів. В деталях сьогодні я говорив з Робертою: укриття для наших шкіл, для дитсадочків, для університетів, укриття для людей, укриття для лікарень. І ми розраховуємо на підтримку Європою нашої програми безоплатного харчування для всіх дітей в усіх школах України. Ми розраховуємо, що ЄС буде також предметно з нами у цих питаннях. І дякуємо всім, хто нам допомагає. Дякуємо дуже, Роберта, тобі особисто ще раз Слава Україні!
Yeah, baby, yeah, but. And that was the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, largely for today. The rest of it was generally a press conference. So that moves us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is the fun segment. Is it a fun segment? All of y'all are here for it. 11.7 thousand of y'all. Holy moly, that's a lot of people. You know, back in the day, folks, that actually used to be the peak of our viewership. And now that's what we're getting at the end of the news segment that's about 2 hours long. Isn't that crazy? How time changes, folks, how time changes many things. Like, for example, at the peak tonight, we had 16.7 thousand people here. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of folks, really, honestly. And 100,000 people have watched this stream over the course of 2 hours. That's a load of other people. That's a lot of people. Loads and loads of people. Millions of people. Well, not millions. It's actually 100,000. But beyond that, we do thank you for all being here so far. And we hope that y'all stick around for our question segment, because it's where we get to talk to a lot of y'all. It's where we get to address the super chats and the live chats, hopefully as many of them as we can. But of course, if you have enjoyed the news segment, and that's really what you were here for, please make sure to subscribe on your way out. I know that tons of people are going to be leaving. It makes us sad. But we also know that a lot of people don't have all the time in the world, and they have to get back to more important things. So if you're just here for the news, and you like how we do it here on these streams, which we thank you so much for enjoying it, and if you don't like it, we don't really give a damn. But if you do like it, please make sure to subscribe. We run this stream 6 days a week, every single day but Monday, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you enjoy the channel, you're welcome, and you're here to stay. If you don't, who gives a shit? Anyways.
And you'll be called in for HR for that one. You'll be in the office at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning over this one.
Man, I just gotta be honest. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to get on into that second segment. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment, it is now time to address our last poll of the stream. And this one says, Russian citizens are flooding social media with videos of the gas shortage, and will Putin crack down soon because it's spreading rapidly? And 48% said yes, Putin will start a new crackdown on social media, while 27% said no, Putin has bigger concerns, and 20% says there's not much left to crack down on. And there's always something to crack down on. If there's a platform for Russians to post something, there is something for Putin to crack down on. So Putin has no bigger concern than keeping himself in power, and silencing the people in Russia, that is his top concern, so that way he doesn't get overthrown. So he definitely has the time for it. He'll make the time for it, trust me. That's one thing he will make time for. So I'm going to believe that Putin will start a crackdown. You'll probably see social media probably get silenced in some way or another by the Putin regime, probably really soon. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my honest opinion, I think that a Putin crackdown, or a Poot down, as we could put it, is coming. I think that's actually going to be coming around the corner, because Putin always has time for a crackdown. Everybody always has time for a crackdown in Russia. Whenever a situation is getting out of control like that, where people are actually starting to realize that their life is hell, they're going to crack that down. You can't have people out here in the West knowing that they're out of gas. They got to sit there and think that the gas is cheap, the groceries are cheap. And sure, they live in a dictatorship, but a dictatorship has so many benefits to it. That's why you ought to support, democratically speaking, of course, in America, dictatorships. You ought to vote for people who are authoritarian. That's what you should be going for. That's the real answer in the world. Democracy, you know, America being the most successful country for the last 250 years on a democratic system, that's just bullshit. Those were lies. Nobody really knew that is true. I mean, clearly every other dictatorship in history worked, you know, like the Soviet Union or Cambodia, or, you know, others, you know, those all worked, clearly. Like, it's not like they were all gone and dead and they failed because they sucked. But clearly the Russians want you to think that Putin's dictatorial style of leadership works. So that's why we gotta have a crackdown in Russia. They can't let you know until the gas is out, because they got nothing but gas in terms of propaganda on the internet. So anyways, all jokes aside, it is time for us to get on into the question segment. And also, I saw some people saying some stuff earlier, and I got to address this really quick. I don't know how in the world everything becomes political these days, but I'm just going to give you all the rundown on it, because I saw some people continuously bringing it up throughout the whole show. I'm just going to be completely frank with y'all. I don't know how people don't see it, but renaming stuff is very political. I'm generally against it entirely. If something was named what it was, I don't really care what it was called, but it's called that, whatever it was originally. Like Mount McKinley. Mount McKinley was Mount McKinley. It was renamed in the, like, just to make sure that I make it incredibly clear that I'm very fair with this, Mount McKinley was renamed to Denali under the Obama administration. I still called it Mount McKinley because it's Mount McKinley. It always was and it always will be. When Fort Benning, which was always Fort Benning, was renamed to Fort Moore, I believe it was, under the Obama administration, I still called it Fort Benning because it was Fort Benning. So nowadays, it's come around that it's time for another political group to start renaming everything. And so now the Gulf of Mexico is the Gulf of America. When I was growing up, it was the Gulf of Mexico. It still is the Gulf of Mexico to me. That's just how it is. I don't really care what political party is renaming the shit. I don't get into that stuff. It's absolutely stupid to me. It doesn't really make any sense. Whatever it is on a map, it doesn't even matter. Like, the Gulf of Mexico isn't called the Gulf of Mexico because Mexico is a great country. It's called the Gulf of Mexico because back in the day, the only people who were down there were the Spanish, and they called it the Gulf of Mexico because the province of Mexico literally encompassed the whole thing. It's just a historical name. It has no connotation or attachment to modern-day Mexico whatsoever. Like, if we're getting into renaming things, there's a million things that could be renamed in America that we could go on and on and on about. Like, for example, like all the things that were renamed in the last decade that everyone was against, like, well, not everyone, some people were against it, like renaming things that were named after, I don't know, Confederate generals and stuff that were renamed and people were against that. That could have been renamed. Florida could be renamed. I mean, literally the name La Florida is a Spanish name from the time that it was a part of the greater province of Mexico. So are we going to rename the state of Florida because it has Mexican connotations to its name? No, that would make no sense. Are we going to rename Alabama? No. Well, like, what type of sense does I don't really know what type of sense the stuff makes, no matter who's doing it, and that's why I don't really get into that whole game. Like, I know a lot of people like to live in their political land world where, the renaming makes sense or the changes to things make sense, but I don't really care what political party is doing it. It's never made sense to me. Even when I was a kid, it made no sense to change the names of stuff that's always been that way. So that's why I don't really get into that whole business. Like, if you want to call it the Gulf of America, have at it. It's a free country. But if you expect me on this channel sit there and bend the knee to whatever political power is in charge and rename Mount McKinley to Denali and Fort Benning to Fort Moore and the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, it doesn't matter what political party is doing it. You're a miss here. I'm not doing that. So I just want to make that a little bit clear for folks going forward. It has no political meaning to it. And also on top of that, another thing, if people are going to want me to say the Department of War, that's going to have to be something done by Congress. Even the Office of the President admitted that the Department of War is an unofficial secondary name, and the official name is the Department of Defense. So I'm calling it by its official name, like we do everything on this channel, the Department of Defense, until that's officially changed by Congress. That might happen here in another year, and when it happens, it will be the Department of War. That's how it works. But for now, that's an unofficial secondary name. It's not the primary name, and we call things by their primary names here on this channel. Like, I go through extreme depths to make sure that everything's accurate. We call the Russians the Russian Federation. We call China the People's Republic of China. We call Taiwan the Republic of China, so on and so forth. I go out of my way to make sure that everything works off of its official name, and so if its official name is still the Department of Defense, it's that until it's congressionally changed by the order of the law. So I hope that it also addresses that somewhat well with the whole naming thing, because I just don't get into that business. It's not for me. So anyways, with that, we are on into the questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our question segment here, our first one, jumping right back into our super chats, goes to none other than Trism666, a channel legend, and thank you very much, Trism, for that $100 support right there, massive support. And Trism said, Enforcer Matt research, best research, and keep up the good work on making sure we know as much as we can, and thank you for all the effort in LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words and the massive support. Your support is helping us to keep this thing running, Trism666, and you help us to be able to keep up the research and to keep up the work that we've been doing every day until perpetuity at this point. I think we're going to be doing this until the day that we roll over and die. Hopefully we'll be like in our 60s and 70s by that point. We'll be like old farts on this channel. What's going on, Sonny? Like we'll be talking about drone wars and stuff in like 50 years. Who knows what things will look like in 50 years? That's really kind of scary.
About begun.
What?
I said, about to begun.
Get that bot out of here, damn it. Like, we ain't talking about them splittits.
What did he say?
What did he say? Man, I'll still be going off. Even then, I'll be sitting there, huh? Your mom? Like, I'm like at 70 and something.
Stop sign. What stop sign?
Oh man, jeez. Honestly, it'll be crazy. It'll be crazy. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the massive support that you've been throwing in tonight, because this is just the first of many super chats that you've thrown in over the course of the night. Trism 666. And I got to say that I thank you so much for enjoying our efforts and our hard work, because you help us to make this thing possible with your support, and you help us to keep this thing rolling every day. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that is addressed that incredibly well. And also, Zombie Turf just put out something that's very descriptive: the Gulf of Oily Shrimp. Honestly, since that BP oil spill, the shrimp have never been the same. I'm not even kidding. Like, people still don't trust the shrimp coming out of the Gulf down here.
You know, honestly, me personally, I'll still eat those shrimp. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, we've got enough pollutants everywhere else. What's a little oily shrimp gonna do to you? Honestly,
man, like, I respect that shrimp, because that shrimp's in there, man. Like that movie There Will Be Blood. He's sitting there. I've abandoned my child. It's like, good, get in that ball. Like, it's like, man, that thing's delicious. But honestly though, like, the Gulf is an interesting place, especially down here on the actual shores of the Gulf itself. And something that's really interesting, folks, is that at a time, this whole thing was controlled by Spain. So you can find little remnants of that all over the place down here, primarily around Mobile. Mobile actually has an old Spanish fort in it, if y'all didn't know, that was called Fort Conde, and I'm trying to see if I can find it here. Here we go. This is a bit of a shame. They actually cut into the thing, because there was no historical preservation laws at the time that this was done. They cut into Fort Conde, and they just ripped out part of it. So part of it is Interstate 10 now. You can look down there and see it from the fort. But this was an original Spanish fort that existed back in the day from the 1500s, to give you all a bit of an idea of how long the Spanish were here before anyone else. This fort still stands a little bit today. I wish I could find y'all, though. Yeah, here you go. Here's Interstate 10 that cuts right through the fort. Dang, right when I said that. Thunder.
Oh, what is that?
That's thunder, son. Don't worry, it got me scared.
That sound like thunder. Let me check the weather channel. What the hell's going on outside? Man, there's no clouds in the area.
That's a little interesting. Like, I don't know what that was. But beyond that, it's very interesting sort of a place here, Fort Conde. I have no clue what that was. I don't know. Are we under a missile attack?
Artillery going off outside.
Yeah.
What the hell was that?
Dude, it went. I was like, what in the hell is that?
It shook that place.
I'm not going to lie. That's a little sus. That's really sus. Oh, by the way.
You missed me.
That missed me. Man, dude, I immediately went to, it's just thunder, it's fine. We don't know what it was, actually. And there's no storms that we know of around the place. Also, by the way, one other little bonus point for all of y'all is that they did just open the Mobile Amtrak station here in Mobile that's a part of the brand new Mardi Gras service, which goes to New Orleans. And it's kind of a little interesting because it starts in Mobile, which is the first place that the Mardi Gras as a holiday or a celebration ever occurred in the United States, and then it goes to what is the modern day capital of Mardi Gras, which is New Orleans. So pretty cool service. I like that they named it that. It's got some historical connotations to it. And look at that Charger! Look at that Charger, man, dude. It's an ALC-42 Charger. I love Chargers. They're so cool. But
I love Chargers. I tell you what, the best Charger is a Hellcat, honestly. That
Man.
base model Charger with the V6, it just doesn't quite hit the same as a Hellcat.
Man, honestly, man, but 4,400 horsepower, or 4,200 horsepower behind your Charger, you gotta admit, that's pretty sick. But still, beyond that, a little interesting fact for y'all about this place down here in what used to be a part of New Spain, which is what Mexico was before it was Mexico. But then later on, they changed it to, I think it was El Mexico, the El Mexico province, which was the whole thing, and then that ended up fracturing further. So, anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best we can. And with that,
Also, by the way, get this. I just checked Weather Channel again. There's exactly one very strong red little cloud hovering right over our place. And it's the only one in the whole area. It's just one hanging right over Enforcer HQ 2.0. And it's very, very red, concentrated right over our roof. Very weird right there. We have angered the FCC. The FCC sent their favorite thundercloud to come pay us a visit, I guess you could say. Just joking, by the way. I'm just joking.
I was just kidding, but the FCC said, Palpatine their ass, electrocute, but anyways. Also, someone said, ooh, that was like the chocolate river. Oh, no, the Mobile River is the chocolate river, my son. It is the chocolate river. Y'all want to see, like, what the Mobile River really looks like? Let me not get y'all in the tunnel. Let me get y'all on this bridge up here. Oh, yeah, the chocolate river of Mobile. Oh, boy, this is one hell of a river. Look at all those barges, by the way. These actually traveled up the Alabama River and everything else here in the state to a degree. But it's really, actually, they travel quite a good bit of ways. Like, you know what's funny, Matthew, is that there's actually a river here north of Birmingham. I have to find it. I think it's Locust Fork. I have to find this, though, because it's really cool. But they bring the barges all the way up here. And they float them all the way down the river, back down there to Mobile. But I got to find this thing now because I brought it up, and it's really interesting to look at. Because you never really think about barges much. Like, that's something I don't even think about often. And they're here. I can't find them, though. That's a shame. Oh, wait a minute. Might be able to find them down here. Oh. Hey, yeah, there it is. There's one. There's a barge. This is a coal barge. They load it with coal, and then they float it all the way down the river, down to Mobile.
Oh, that's kind of interesting right here. It kind of looks like that Scooby-Doo thing that they had going on where they're like putting those logs in the water and floating them down the river and have the diamonds like hidden inside the logs or something like that. It kind of looks like that whole setup. Obviously, that's a Scooby-Doo episode, though. That's not real life, you know?
Well, that was actually based off a logging camp, which is kind of similar, but they take these barges and then they float them all the way down to Mobile to McDuffel Island right here, and then they place the barges down here. Well, let's see if I can find one somewhere. Oh, yeah, here are all of them. They place them here. Bring them over here, and then they excavate all the coal out of the barges, and then they put them here on McDuffel Island. And then that's loaded on to larger coal-carrying ships, and then they transport it further on out from there. The logistics is a very interesting thing, folks. I really like to research a lot about it, especially around our area. This is just really interesting to know how everything interconnects together and how it all economically works in a way. So really cool stuff with that. And I hope y'all learned something about where the coal goes that's mined here in Alabama. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next question. But a huge thanks to you once again for support, Chosen 666. And I have no clue, Matthew, who would be next in the spreadsheet because I don't have the spreadsheet up at the moment. So who is next in the spreadsheet?
So up next in our super chats, we have another one from Trism 666 who puts in a 50 this time. And thank you very much, Trism, for that second $50 support right there. We do appreciate that very, very much. And Trism said, are there even enough windows in Russia for Putin to crack down an LSA?
Oh, there's plenty. If there's a will, there's a way. If there isn't a window, they'll make one. Like they will do it. There's enough of them out there. I promise you that. So I wouldn't doubt it. And I bet your boots that they will make windows when they need them. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. Because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep it running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Could you imagine, like, just imagine the reality of that? Because this actually happens, by the way. It's become a joke, like the window treatment in Russia. It's become like a whole joke. But what happens? This is literally the reality of it. Somebody who's gotten on Putin's bad side, and there's a guy in Russia who just recently got on Putin's bad side and just got relieved from his position. Putin might be eyeing him for maybe another window. I don't know. That's Putin's shady dealings with that. But the previous people that have gotten thrown out of windows, they literally will show up at their apartment or some like high place with windows. They'll go inside, they'll turn the lights on, and there's a group of FSB waiting for them inside, and they will literally take them to the balcony and toss them off of it. That's literally as bad, and that's the reality of it. That's how bad it really is. That's horrifying. And they do it on purpose to make a big like scene about it. So awful. And then everybody acts like, oh, that's terrible. He just tripped and fell out of that window, not knowing that there was probably FSB guys just lurking up there waiting to take the guy out. So it's horrible, like when you really think about the reality of it. And they've done it to so many oligarchs over the past like few years. Like there's a laundry list of oligarchs that have just fallen out of windows like that from like 100-story buildings, just hundreds of them. You can find the list. I think it's on Wikipedia, and they keep adding to it like pretty much every month.
Well, you know what's crazy is that that's actually a historical way to assassinate people in Russia.
Like during the USSR too? Like I'm not familiar with it.
Way back. I'm talking way back. Back to the era of Ivan the Terrible. He was actually the first to ever do that in Russian history, and he would have political opponents taken to the towers of the Kremlin and thrown from their tallest heights.
Ah, that's tough right there. What was the government that used to take people up in no, I think that might have been the cartel actually. They took people
No,
up
no,
in the
that was
helicopter and then
Augusto
they threw them
Pinochet.
out.
That was Pinochet down
Oh
in
yeah,
Chile.
yeah. Yeah, I remember that. That was terrible. Like I think they even televised some of those, like throwing the people out of the helicopter and stuff like that. Like throwing people from the heights, like that's to make a statement. Like the governments assassinate people, but throwing people from a height, especially trying to like televise it, that's really making the statement.
I would have to say it really is. Also, another group that did that was the White Horse in Vietnam. I can't confirm this because someone told me this. They've since passed, but they were around one of the bases in Vietnam. Let's see, I think it's Holloman Base, Air Force Base or Army Base inside of Pleiku, and the White Horse from South Korea was there. And they would take North Vietnamese guys that they captured, and they would put them all in a loach, and they'd take them up, and they'd ask them, tell us, what unit you're from. If they wouldn't say, they throw one out to make an example, and usually that loosened up everyone else to get some answers out of them. That's at least what he said was going on, and he also said that they had been given strict orders: never look to that side of the base, and never look at what's going on. And he did look over there, and they were doing that sort of a thing.
Yeah, that's a rough one right there. But the Russians just do it so blatantly, and everybody knows how they do it. It's not a secret anymore. It's just when you know that someone's fallen from a window. Also, you remember like the atrocious like cover-ups they tried to do near the beginning of the war. There was a guy, I can't remember what company he was in charge of, but there was a really prominent oligarch in Russia. He ended up in the hospital for some reason, and then they said while he was in the hospital bed trying to get treated by the doctors, somehow the guy got up out of the hospital bed while he was still hooked up to the IV and everything. He somehow stumbled over to the window, unlocked the window, somehow walked out to the balcony, and then tripped and fell over the balcony, and it was like 6 stories up. And he fell down, and obviously that was the end of that guy. And he did that while he was in the hospital. And then they said, oh, the security cameras were out too. They were doing maintenance on it at the exact same time. Like the stories aren't even believable when they try to pull it off.
Yeah, like that whole thing about some guy dying in like prison and the security cameras went out at the exact minute. Like it's so weird. Like that kind of thing, not really believable. But also,
I mean, in New York, Russia?
No, I was talking about like a foreign country. That obviously would never happen in America. I mean, never
Oh,
in
yeah.
America would an important person ever be put in prison that's got the whole public's attention on him. That could be a part of a massive national scandal. And the security cameras go out at the exact minute that he drops dead inside of the prison. And somehow the prison guards weren't around to stop it and everything. Like, that would never happen in this country. That is an absolutely ridiculous sort of assumption. And anyone who makes that, they're clearly not thinking with a lot of brains and sense. Just it's impossible, folks. It's impossible. Right? Right? It's impossible. Absolutely. Also, by the way, someone asked, what is a loach? This is a loach. This thing goes under a load of names. Some people call it the cayuse. Some people call it a little bird. Some people call this thing a loach. Back in Vietnam, this thing was called a loach. And also, it's technically a little bit different than a little bird. A little bird's kind of like an upgraded version of a cayuse, which is also a loach. But that's what this is. These were around a lot in Vietnam. And you also see the cute little minigun that they had protruding from the rear door. And that thing's connected to an internal feed system that connects it to a whole belt of 7.62 or 308 to be able to use. So pretty nice stuff. Pretty neat little thing. But it was a recon helicopter back in the day. And that's what it was actually designed to do. It was an Army recon helicopter. So they would
Gotta
take
love
them.
the little bird. Like the little bird's such a favorite of the spec ops people. Like the spec ops people love to use these days. Like whenever they're doing, like for example, I think the spec ops headquarters is down in Florida. I think it might be in Clearwater. I can't remember where it is. It's somewhere down there. But they do like a little yearly thing where they like bring the little birds through the little Florida town and stuff like that, and they put on like a whole show with it and everything. And they always use little birds every time they do it. It's pretty cool. Like I'll admit, it's very cool to see that.
Yeah, they actually have a version of this thing. I think it's called the Killer Egg. Yeah, it is the Killer Egg. Here we are. There's a specific variant of this thing that is called a Killer Egg, and it's used by the Special Forces. And it's outfitted with a neat little array. I'm trying to see. Damn, I think it's the MH6M. But this is, I think, one of them. But dang, I can't find it. Here's one that actually has a hydropod and a Gal 12.7 on it. That's actually pretty powerful. That's a 50 caliber rotary cannon. So that's a pretty cool one.
This is also known as a buzzard to some people.
That's GTA. That's
Yeah.
GTA.
Well, that's what it
man.
is. They
That's
call it a
GTA.
buzzard.
But yeah, I think these things are so neat. Honestly, folks, if I ever got a helicopter, I would want to get one of these. I just think they're really cool. I love them. I think they're amazing. But anyways, also just look at that. I mean, that is so cool looking.
That is cool. And also can carry a hell of a lot of people for that little thing.
Yeah, I think you can carry like 5 guys, burgers and fries up in that thing. Like it's
That's
like
expensive. Then you got to take out a loan to ride in that helicopter.
oh hell yeah, you got to take out a whole loan. Also, look at the civilian version. Man, that looks wrong.
It does. Also, by the way, correction, SOCOM is in Tampa, actually. It was not Clearwater. I don't know what made me think about Clearwater, but it's Tampa. That's where they put on the whole show and everything like that. So, yeah, if you haven't seen that, it's pretty cool. I'd like to go down there and see that one day when they actually do that yearly. That's something I would actually like to see in person.
I would have to say that would be pretty cool. But with that, folks, it is time for us to get on to the next one.
And our next one also goes to Trism666, and thank you very much, Trism, for throwing in the third super chat of the night, a $50 donation, and we appreciate that very, very much. And Trism said, Gulf of Enforcer map petition started when? And I'll sign that, LSA. I say call it that. I say why not? Some people say that's the best name for the Gulf. Some people say they haven't heard a better name in their life for the Gulf. I would say, personally, I'm not one to argue with the people. I'm a man of the people, and if that's what the people want, then that's what we have to have. That's what they're saying. Some people say that they want it, and some people say that they want it. But thank you very much, Trism, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah. Anyways, we're working on that ballroom, and that thing's looking ballsy. But still, I got to thank you for the massive support, Trism666, and I would have to say that is an interesting petition. Generally, though, I think I just say let's rename it back to the Gulf of Mexico, just to keep things as they were, because why change it? And also, I don't think that's what a lot of people are getting here about these political renamings. And I say this across the board, and I don't think a lot of people understand this when we say it, because a lot of people are coded that if you say anything in opposition of something going on in foreign policy or anything, you're just clearly the other side. Because, when we were saying things against the last president, I remember how it went. We were around. We were alive then. Whenever we would say something in opposition of the last president, which was Biden in foreign policy, we'd say Biden's foreign policy here and there isn't that great. We get called a MAGA Republican fascist for disagreeing with a guy. Now that there's a Republican in charge, who's Trump, now we get called a liberal snowflake communist, so on and so forth deal because we disagree with that. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but we just, kind of call it for what it is. We don't really agree with either side. And when we see something that isn't really that great, we just say what it is. It's what we do. And back when people on the other side, when people on the left were renaming stuff, I wasn't for that. When people are on the right are renaming stuff, I'm not really for that either. I don't really know what the point of renaming any of it is because it doesn't change anything. It literally just changes the name. And I thought a whole bunch of people found that to be pretty stupid, like a couple of years ago. So why in the world is it in vogue now? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's kind of like how people are against cancel culture until it's for them, and then they're all for it. It's kind of like that. Like everyone's against something until they're doing it. Like they're against wars until it's a war that they want. They're against breaking the law until they're breaking the law. It's that sort of a deal that I just can't get on board with. Like I was against name changes under the last administration. I'm still against them. It doesn't matter who's doing them. I just think they're goofy. They serve no purpose. Why are we doing that? It doesn't change anything. I mean, like, if you're down there in the Gulf of Mexico or whatever the hell you want to call it, changing the name hasn't changed anything. Like, it hasn't changed the territorial waters or the exclusive economic zones of the U.S. and Mexico. It hasn't changed the coordinates that you put in on a map to navigate a ship through this area. It's done nothing but just change the symbolic name. And I don't know why we would even go through the effort to do that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like renaming Mount McKinley to Denali and then back to it again to Mount McKinley. What sense does it make? It was originally named Mount McKinley when the U.S. Got Alaska as it wasn't actually named anything until the U.S. surveyed it in the early 1900s, and then it was named Mount McKinley in honor of President McKinley, who was assassinated. It was that way up until I think like 2009 or 2010, and then it was renamed Denali. And it's like, well, it was always Mount McKinley. Why would we change the name of it now? It makes no sense. It's always been Mount McKinley. So that's generally the mindset I come from. And some people don't understand that because they go, I'm a political Scrooge, so I just have to follow whatever the upper people above me say. But I don't really know if people also understand this, but you're not following them. They're supposed to be following you. You're the one who votes for them, so they're supposed to be vying for you, not the other way around. And everyone in this country has this ass-backwards way of looking at things now as to where the politicians tell you what to do and you work for them when it's the other way around. down, you tell them what to do, and they work for you. And nobody does that anymore politically, in a sense. Everyone acts like their politicians run them instead of you running the politicians. And that whole thing, like, that's why, folks, I just can't get into the whole politics thing, because the politicians literally lay out the very stuff that their supporters vote them in for. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, you could be living in squalor right now. Like, you could be in a Republican or a Democrat state, and you could be living in absolute squalor because of the poor policies that have been implemented by your Republican or Democrat senator or representative. But if they tell you, like, this is how politics works nowadays, if they tell you that everything is fine and it's doing better, and if you disagree, you're a stupid idiot, people will just sit there and agree with them, even with their life getting worse, and they'll just vote them in again. And that's just so dumb. It's like I don't even know how that's the case. Like, if someone, like, if we were being honest, if things are getting worse, it's getting worse. Generally, there needs to be a change in leadership. Someone else needs to be elected. That's not how it works anymore. If they just tell you things are going fine, you just believe them at face value, and you just vote them in again. And that's, like, I just can't get into that sort of a thing, folks. Like, that sort of politics that's exhibited in the country these days is so far off base from what it even should be. That's why I can't really even get into politics, because you're working with people who don't think for themselves. They just get told by the politicians they're supposed to be voting in or out what is good and what's not. And obviously they're going to be saying that everything they're doing is good, and then people just believe them at face value and just keep running with it.
Well, what's worse than that is people that cheer on their rights getting taken away. That's what really just hurts my soul, like, to the core, is when I see people getting so invested so heavily into partisan politics that they're willing to cheer on the removal of their rights, especially their First Amendment right. And this is not political, folks. If you have gotten so deep down the political rabbit hole that you are so happy to see someone that you disagree with getting canceled or their voice taken away because you don't like what they're saying, then you've gotten far down the rabbit hole. You need to look at yourself and think, wait a minute, am I letting my personal biases and hatred toward one person cloud my entire judgment about everything, about every American in this country and our right to be able to speak freely? And people need to look at that, because one thing that's disturbing me these days a lot, and it's really been weighing on me today, we don't get into it on the stream directly because it gets too political, but just speaking in a general sense, people are more than happy to toss their rights down the drain, their right to free speech, just so they can get a one-over political victory over the guy that they didn't like saying the opinion they didn't like. That just hurts my soul. I'm like, what the hell has happened to America at this point? People are cheering on their rights being taken away. And I get the fact that people don't like what certain people say. Like, I understand that. I don't personally like certain people saying things either. But at the same time, though, we're supposed to fight for the right for that person to be able to at least say that. And if we don't like it, we can debate them. But the goal is not to destroy somebody over it because they have an opinion. I mean, there's been a lot of people recently that have gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to exercising free speech. And it's becoming common now. So I just don't like it. It's disturbing to me. I wish we could get into it more directly, but we do adhere to our no politics rule, and we're going to have to abide by that. So I think you'll get the idea.
I think you'll get the idea. Just to add my 2 cents to it, it is really concerning to see that. And it's even concerning more so to see the kind of responses, because Enforcer Matt's the one who runs the Twitter. I really don't post a lot on it. I repost on it, but I don't make original posts. Those are all Enforcer Matt's. But I'll see the post that he makes, and I always agree with him because we generally agree on that sort of stuff. And he'll say something like, the First Amendment is, in a very concerning position. And then people will go, oh, well, I mean, the last administration violated the First Amendment rights, so now it's only fair that it's our turn. And it's like, how the hell do people think like that? I'd say it's wrong across the board. Like, just to be completely straight up, there was a decent amount of First Amendment infringements made then and now. I think everyone ought to be in agreement that's not really a good thing. Just because it's your side doing it doesn't mean it's fair. And because the last guy did it, now we're justified in doing it as well. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. That's like saying, okay, so because there was a civil war in America, and they, ended up killing a whole bunch of Union soldiers, we'll just go into the South and wipe everyone out. Like, it's like, how the hell, that's the kind of mindset people would have today if they lived back then. And it's like, that's just really, really sort of bizarre to see, that people go around with that sort of justification nowadays. It's quite literally, well, the other side did something that I thought was egregiously wrong, so now it's our turn to do that very same wrong thing. Although we know it's wrong, and we're openly admitting it's wrong, we're going to do it as well. Like, I don't really know how that sort of thing works. Like, I really don't. I don't know how people mentally justify that sort of a deal, because I thought it was wrong when anyone was doing it. But apparently, if you're on one side or the other, then when you do it, it's fine. But when the other people do it, it's egregious and it's wrong and it's criminal, until you get your chance to do it again. It just doesn't make any sense. It's very immature. It's very childish. Churlish. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just bizarre that it kind of works that way.
And some of it's just out of just not knowing. I hate to say ignorance because it sounds like I'm attacking people that don't understand how it works, but I'm not trying to, attack people that don't understand it. You don't have to understand the legality of every single thing out there. But here's the catch, folks. If a company, and I'm going to try to make this as generic as possible, if a company is beholden to the government and the government regulates that company, then the government has a soft power over that company. Because if a government decides that we don't like something that company is doing, the government can simply say, okay, you can do what we say, or we're going to investigate the hell out of you, and you're going to hate your life because we're going to investigate the hell out of you. They can do that. And sometimes companies feel that it's better just to comply with the government's demand and maybe do the wrong thing and violate the law, other than to simply get investigated into oblivion and back. That's what some of them think. And I think that's something right there that people are missing. The government doesn't have to come out and directly say we're silencing that person's voice. They can come out and tell a company, like, for example, we're obviously on a company's platform. If the government wanted to, they could come and threaten that company, and then that company is going to face a decision. They're going to say, okay, are we going to get in a fight with the government, which the whole force of the federal government might come down on our head if we don't comply with it, or are we simply going to silence that person's voice? Most of the time these days, it looks like the companies are just silencing people's voices. That's what it looks like. We hope for the best, but it looks like most companies aren't fighting for the rights of their consumers these days, which is something that's concerning to see there. So I don't know. Like, to me, seems like we got a lot of partisanship in federal administrations these days, and that is dangerous, because when it starts happening like that and the government has this power over companies, it starts getting out of hand quick, and a lot of people are too ignorant to see it for what it is. It's government interference in private companies under the threat of federal investigations, and that carries a lot of weight behind it. So, some people don't see that. I personally see it. I think the enforcer sees it, so it's kind of the way it works.
And I don't think some other people are realizing this, because some people are like, well, private companies have a right to do what they want. And yes, they do, but free from government interference. Like, because the government leans left or right doesn't mean that they have the authority to lean on all of these companies and threaten them pretty much extrajudicially to either curb speech from the left or right because it doesn't agree with their standpoint of whoever's in charge in the government. That is an undue influence on these companies. Like, if a company naturally leans right or left, that's one thing. But if the government's coming in and forcing a company to suppress right or left-leaning voices because they don't like them, that's a totally different other animal. That's not a private company making its own autonomous decisions. That's the government making those decisions, but passing it off as, well, this is a private company. They can do what they want, although we're pretty much threatening them in the background. If they don't do what we want, we're going to screw them over. That was done. That was been done quite a lot recently over the past few years. You can think of a lot of examples, and I'm sure a lot of people are about to bring up, but the last administration, yeah, they did, but, it doesn't make it right in any situation. That's why I don't think a lot of people are understanding. There's no way that that's justifiable. That's just not supposed to be done across the board.
Wasn't it nice when people stood on principle back in the day? Now, it wasn't perfect. Obviously, there was a slew of problems, like, 20, 30 years ago, but there were more people back in the day, even that ran companies, that would stand on principle. They would say, to the government, they would say, okay, we get the fact you're trying to tell us to do something, but unless you have the legal right to tell us to do that, we're not doing it. And they would stand up and they would fight in court over it. These days, it seems like companies just roll over. Like, they're like, oh, the government told me to do something. Oh my God, we're going to do it instantly. Like, we can't afford to be investigated or something like that. And they throw their consumers under the bus that are helping to keep their company going. So it seems like nobody's willing to stand for what's right. If it comes at personal expense, most people these days are going to say, hey, look, better them than me. I'm not taking a fall for it. I'm just going to do what they say and move on. That's the way it works these days. That's a shame too. Also, because if the law is being violated and people aren't willing to say, hey, I'm not going to stand for that. You're not going to violate my rights, etc. And people are just pushovers. Then the government's going to keep pushing, and they're going to keep pushing so far until we go into a situation where we don't have the democracy we have anymore. So the whole democracy relies on people being educated. It relies on them pushing back against government overreach. So when people don't do that, it becomes a problem.
And also, I just saw someone say ABC has abused their broadcast license neutrality consequence. Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, so if we have to say that networks are neutral, right? So does that mean that Fox News gets taken off of air and CNN gets taken off of air because CNN clearly leans left and Fox leans right? Because technically, technically, if that's an issue, if they're violating some sort of neutrality clause in their broadcasts, I mean, it doesn't take an idiot to see that Fox News and CNN are incredibly partisan. One leans to the right, one leans to the left. So off of that same kind of logic, we also should be threatening to take Fox off air as well as CNN for their violations of neutrality on their broadcasting license, and we're not. That's where you see that there's a bit of an issue there. If you don't see that, then you're blind. But this, that those sorts of targetings are not something that's just partial or being done for the hell of it. It's something that's targeted, and that's the issue.
It's the precedent that's dangerous. It's not who it's happening to right now. And as crude as and crass as it sounds, the guy that takes the fall today for it, the guy that got on the short end of the stick, that's not the big deal. It's the precedent that's being set for the future, and how future governments are going to use that precedent. That's the concerning part to me, because it usually when things get crossed and lines get crossed, usually they expand and get worse from there. So it's concerning. Hopefully people wake up to it. I'm not sure if they will though, but at least some people see it, but not enough see it.
And also, I see a lot of people saying, well, what in the world qualifies so-and-so as news? It's not even about news. It's about freedom of expression. You should have a right to be able to say just about whatever you want. If anyone's trying to suppress that right, that's where the issue comes in. It doesn't really matter whether you agree with it or not. Because a lot of y'all like this channel a lot. Like, y'all are big fans of it. Y'all come here every day to watch the show. What if that kind of undue pressure is eventually used on us to take us off air? Think about that. It can come around. Like, the axe, it doesn't swing one way. The axe swings both ways, forward and back. And, it can eventually come and get you, or it can get someone else that in that kind of a situation. The axe knows no loyalty. It just knows to chop, and that's it. So, when you sit there and try and justify this kind of stuff, considering a lot of y'all come to the show every single night, and you find it to be a fan favorite, we're one of the biggest shows in America, this sort of thing can happen to us. Like that's what's concerning about that whole deal, is if someone disagrees with us, we could just kind of be erased in a sense with the kind of precedent that's being laid out these days. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Bobo Vasquez, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Bobo, for that support as well. And we do appreciate that. And Bobo said, just helping to keep the lights on, and go LSA.
Hey, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to help keep this channel running and make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the Tovaris, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Tovaris, as well, for supporting the channel. And they said, if we don't know what the F-22 hit, then technically it's unidentified. And the F-22 is an air superiority fighter, so it had to be flying. So was it a UFO kill?
It technically is qualified as one for now, but it doesn't mean that's like an alien from outer space. It's just some unidentified flying object that's most likely definitely terrestrial, but we wouldn't really know more than that. But technically, you're pretty much correct with that assessment. So a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Frostbit Jenna, last name Tolls, once again. And thank you very much, Frostbit Jenna, for that support. They put in a 20 this time and said the Gulf of who gives a damn.
Is that what they really said?
Something like that. I had to bridge it a little bit.
Well, I thank you so much for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. And honestly, that's what I think, but I just still go with original names. I don't put a lot of thought into it. Also, like another thing that I just have to ask people about that one: who in the world was like really begging out of all the issues that we have in this country, no matter what side you're on it? When in the world was it a vogue topic to rename the Gulf of Mexico? Like, when did that ever become a thing? It never was. It was just done out of the blue, and then people acted like they're gonna either live or die on that hill. And I don't even get that, because it was something that it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't even talked about at all, and then it was just done one day, and then everyone acted like we always wanted that. It's like, or they always hated that idea, like it had always existed. And like, I gotta be honest with y'all folks, I cannot say enough how much modern politics just drives me crazy with how little sense there is in the whole thing. it really just, like, it drives me up a wall. Like, I don't really understand how that's the modern political discourse. There was no discussion from anyone about that, whether they liked that or didn't. And then it just came out of the blue, and half of everyone acted like it was the end of the planet, and then the other half of people acted like it was the most important thing in the world, and we have to defend that with the very fiber of our being, or else, it's over. I don't get that. Like, I have no get that.
I think people are brainwashed. I think people are brainwashed personally. They've gone so far down the rabbit hole of getting into partisanship that they've lost. Most people these days have lost all ability to reason rationally whatsoever, and they simply follow what they're told. It's almost like they've been hypnotized to a degree. It's like whatever they're told, they instantly store that in their mind as fact and truth. They don't even question it. Like, it's just instant. It's like they see other people repeating it. That's social proof for them, and they say, "Oh, if I want to fit into that group, that cult that I'm in right now, I got to repeat that." So they start repeating it without any critical thought whatsoever. It's disturbing to see it. It's literally operating like politics. It's not on just one side, folks. It's on multiple sides. It's operating like huge cults at this point. And cults aren't good. Cults lead people bad places. Like, cults are not healthy for people. People don't think freely in cults. They're told what to think, and that's the end of it. And that's not democracy.
Yeah, and I see some people saying, like, I don't think y'all are understanding this, like, folks, like, some people are like, well, so-and-so was really political. Yeah, you can be that way in this country. Like, what about everyone else? Like, there's a load of other people who are political out there. Like, you can name a million of them. Everyone out there at this point is political. We're the only people on, practically that I know of on the internet that doesn't really pick a political side. We just call stuff for what it is, whether it's good or not, no matter who's doing it. Like, we're one of the few who do that. Like, I would say you can probably count people like that on one hand. Everyone else is extremely political. They lean far left or far right. So saying, well, that guy deserved to get his voice silenced because he's really political, that literally is everyone. Like, that's everyone on the planet. That's everyone on Fox News. That's everyone on CNN. That's everyone on MSNBC. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. It matters that these folks have a right to say what they want. And if that company is making money and profiting off of these people saying whatever the hell they want, they have a right to have those people on air and to say whatever the hell they want. If you want that to be changed, then you can go through Congress and you can pass a law saying that there has to be a strictly enforced political neutrality on television like there is on radio. Because on radio, they cannot be politically biased. They're like, well, technically, if you're a news channel, you cannot be politically biased at all because they laid that out at the very turn of the last century, and then they never really did that with television. You have to give equal airtime technically to both sides on television, but you don't have to be neutral. That was never laid out for television through the FCC. So, if you want to make it neutral, you can force that through a congressional act, but you can't just go around pressuring people, and go, okay, well, I lean left or right, so all the other voices from the other side, I'm going to use the power of the federal bureaucracy to threaten them. Like, you can't do that. And that's been done. Like, and that's not just being done today. That was being done like 4 years ago and 5 years ago, and it's wrong every time. Like, there's no way to justify any of that. It's a abridgment. It's a violation of the First Amendment, largely, and it's putting it under the thin veil that it's technically a private company doing it. It's not the government actually doing it. We're just forcing private companies to do what we want, or else, which is pretty much the same thing as the suppression of freedom of speech. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to none other than Duncan VR, and he puts in a 23 Australian, and thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. And he brings some levity to the stream. He's bringing back to animal essences here, animal noises. He said, "Baba woof rough. I'm calling it the Marmot Department. The Marmot is eating hamburgers. It's the greatest. I call it the Gulf of Marmot. Let's break out the Marmot." He's, excuse me. I about sneezed there, by the way. I wasn't freaking out. I was about to sneeze, but they said the Gulf of Marmot, let's break out the Marmot. He sounds like somebody junior there. Oh man, that fly.
Oh, hello
there, Governor. How you doing? You want your free speech, do you? Well, have a plum instead. You can't speak when you're eating a plum, so go ahead and have one.
Oh man, I don't think I will. Oh man. But that is the Marmot and the Fly. We love Alan the Marmot. Alan the Marmot is an amazing animal, an amazing mammal, and we love to have Alan the Marmot on air. And I got to say, huge thanks to you for the support, Duncan VR, and helping this channel to keep on running, because you help us to keep this thing rolling and make this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one. And also, no, the channel ain't about politics. It's not. Like, I don't know if people know that, but whenever we call out something, we're like, that's not really a good thing. It's a very fair assessment. Like, I don't know, like it's so stupid when you sit there and say these days that we ought to stand up for a collective defense against people who are clearly trying to invade us and kill us from foreign countries. People call you warmongers. When you sit there and stand up for constitutional rights, no matter who's trying to crush them, people sit there and call you political. It's an upside down world that we live in these days out here. Like, people do not think with their brains. Hardly anyone does. It's really sad to see it, because you sit here in a country like this that's done so many great things. It's been so accomplished. It was the pioneer in public education. It was the pioneer in public works. It was the pioneer in the post office, the fire departments, every single public service out there imaginable. We were one of the pioneers of. We were the pioneers of the railroads, of space exploration, of flight, of electricity, of millions of things. This country has done so many incredible things with so many bright minds behind it. And while everyone didn't agree through all of history, because there's always been multiple different opinions on things, we still came together and made a great country out of it. People these days, across the board, are just so ignorant and uneducated, and are so tribalistic, and don't listen to shit, and don't think with their heads. It's a real shame, folks. Like, I just gotta be just straight up. It's a real absolute shame. I really don't know how in the world the country got into this in just a couple of decades, because it wasn't like this in the 90s. It wasn't like this in the 80s. It wasn't even like this in the early 2000s. And people these days just don't think with a damn head. It's going to be the doom of this country if people don't turn that around really quick. And what's stupid is that you'll sit there and say that, and then people use that as an affirmation to go further into right or left-leaning political views. And it's absolutely stupid. People have got to think with some sense. Like, it's just so sad to see it. Like, nobody on the left or the right thinks with sense. Nobody does. Everybody just wants to go hard into whatever the hell they believe, act like the other side's out to kill them, and then just go with that forever. And then so it's just a shame, really. I just don't really know where to go with it often, folks, because we go.
And then also people exacerbate it too by taking the most fringe, like extreme example from each side, and they'll bring them onto TV and be like, "Look at this crazy lunatic," and they will actually be like, they'll actually sound crazy. Like, they'll bring out some crazy person from the right or some crazy person from the left, and they'll say the most extreme crazy crap you've ever heard. But they're the extreme example. They're like the 0.1% of that side, and they'll bring them out and be like, "This is an example of the entire side. This is why you should hate X, Y, and Z." It's like, and then people will fall for it. People will be like, "Oh, that must represent the whole party," even though I literally have neighbors that believe the same thing as that party believes, and they're not crazy like that one crazy person, but people will believe it. And it's that type of stuff. It's like the media. I'm not in favor of censoring people, but I will say this: the blame does lie in the media for exacerbating that. They do exacerbate it in the name of making money. They will do that stuff knowing that it's inflaming the American population, and knowing that it's going to drive more traffic to their channel, because rage creates views and clicks. They'll do it knowingly, knowing that it's creating that, just so they can make a buck.
And it's so sad, folks. It really is sad, because we can't even say anything anymore like the Gulf of Mexico or something without people turning it into this stupid political argument. Like, I don't even understand the argument. Like, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't really matter what you call it, to be entirely honest with you. If you want to call it the Gulf of America, have at it. I really don't care. Like, if you said the Gulf of America to me in my face, I'd still know what you were talking about. And I wouldn't sit there and go, "Gary, the Gulf of Mexico, you idiot." Like, I don't really give a shit. But I'm going to the Gulf of Mexico. And somehow that ends up being a huge argument. Somehow saying something like, freedom of speech has to be protected ends up being a huge argument. It doesn't make any damn sense what's going on. Like I just got to be honest with you. I just got to be completely unfiltered for a minute. It doesn't make any damn sense what's going on anymore. To have y'all know, back in the last 4 years when we were running this channel, we had to say and curb certain things to avoid the ire of the left. Now we're having to do the same thing, in a sense, because of what's going to be happening now from another side. We've been doing this for years, through one administration to the next, and we have been around to see it, because it swings one way and then the other, and we have to sit here and go, okay, are we going to get the axe because we said something that whoever's in charge right now doesn't necessarily agree with, and are they going to put pressure on some private company to start shutting down people that they don't agree with? And we've been doing that for years now, and it's going on again. And we're finally saying something like, we don't really like that. That's not really a good thing. It's not really beneficial for the country, no matter who's doing it. And then stupid people want to sit there and go, "Oh, it's definitely beneficial." Like, you don't even know what kind of position we're in. To the people who are saying that, you're not a voice. Like just to the people who say that, nobody listens to what you say. You don't have to worry about that kind of pressure. You say stuff, nobody's ever going to come and get you. We say stuff, someone might come and shut us down, like no matter who it is, on the left, the right, whoever. So we actually have to look at that and go, damn, the axe is swinging another way now. Are we going to get it? And that's the stupid question we have to ask. It's a crazy sort of a thing. And we look at that and we point it out to some folks. And back in the day, back a couple of years ago, it was, well, the axe is swinging my way, so it's A-okay to some people. Now we're sitting here nowadays and the axe swinging another way, and now to another group of people, the axe swinging that way is A-okay by me. Totally fine and no complaints. It's just really crazy. I just don't even understand it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to No Please, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, No Please, for that support. They said, what do you guys enjoy the most about doing what you do? And what inspired you to begin this war news journey? And much appreciated for the apolitical news I've tuned into for the last 341 days and counting. And for me, I joined a month after the Enforcer started the channel. He was the first one to start it, and I joined a month after. Me personally, I enjoy the most about this is being able to find the news and choose which stories we're showing to people. And we get to report stuff that mainstream doesn't even touch. Like, you won't even hear these stories on mainstream media anymore. They don't cover it. They cover politics. They don't cover what's happening in Europe, what's happening around the world. They could literally change all of our lives in a matter of 24 hours. So we've become basically the media. And now, obviously, there are other people that do what we're doing, but we try to do it as best as possible. And that's what we like to perfect every time we come on here, is trying to do it the best we can. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. It looks like a lot of people enjoy what we do. But Enforcer, what say you?
Actually, the channel started about, I think it was like 7 months before Enforcer Matt joined, but it was a month into the war in Ukraine that he joined on. Because when he said that, I was like, man, this channel was like around for a really long time before that. But the channel, I started it off way, way back in September, actually this month, 4 years ago. And I started it because I actually had gotten tired of hearing mainstream news, because you would turn it on, you'd hear CNN or Fox, and you'd hear bullshit, and you'd hear the same political stories every day. So I said, well, it would be pretty cool if I tried to give a shot at it and see if it turned out well. So the first 2 videos that were made on the channel was about the fall of Afghanistan and the whole, like literally the whole 1,000-year history behind it that led up to that. And then also the next video that I made after that was about the ongoing protests and riots in Hong Kong and all that. Those videos did pretty damn good, actually, for what they were. I mean, like, both of them got, I think, like 500 views each, and I only had, like, I think 11 subscribers. I didn't really realize how good that was back then. I thought it did terribly. It actually did pretty well for the subscriber ratio and the viewership ratios and everything, which I didn't know. So I got really discouraged after those videos, and then I went into running a gaming channel because, I felt really, like, just to be honest with y'all, I felt absolutely deflated after making 2 videos. I spent, like, a week straight making each of them for them to get, like, 500 views. I was like, man, this is just too tough. Like, I gotta do something easier. So then I started doing video games for a great deal of months. Loads of them. Like, I would play War Thunder, some other games, like horror games, stuff like that I thought people would be interested in. Those did even worse. Like, those were terrible, but they were easier to make, and I just kind of had fun doing something, so I did those. And so finally, one day I was playing Train Simulator. Funny story there. I was playing Train Simulator, and the war in Ukraine started, and someone that I still know to this day actually told me, hey, they're bombing Ukraine right now. So I stopped that stream, started these streams on the very first hour of the war starting in history, in the history of the war for that matter, and then started running them every single night. And for the first 3 nights, the stream got like no traction at all. I think the peak viewership was like 5 live viewers. And then on the 4th night, it blew up and it got up to, I think, 3.8 thousand live viewers, which was insane to me at the time. And really nowadays, it doesn't really seem like much because we even have 8.7 thousand people here 3 hours in right now. But back then, that was absolutely huge. And the channel got 1.7 thousand subscribers that night. So then I was just absolutely blown away. I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh, I can actually do what I originally wanted to do with this channel, which was cover news, because I like talking about that stuff and the historical side of things with it and how wars work or how the military works and stuff like that. I think it's really interesting and fun to talk about. So then well, actually, Matthew wasn't even around yet still. Then it started running every single day, 7 days a week. And then when Enforcer Matt joined, I think a week after that, we rolled back to a 6-day schedule, and then we've been doing that since. But that was generally like the origin story about how I first started the channel, and then Matthew came on about a month later. But the reason why I did it originally was because I actually did want to cover news. I didn't actually know how good those first videos did. Looking back at them now, I actually had something going on then, and it actually was doing somewhat well. I didn't know that then, but you know, that was generally why I wanted to do it, is because I thought that we could do well, I could do individually a better job than the mainstream news. And nowadays we do a greater job than mainstream news, both of us together, because we beat them in the ratings on YouTube for live stream viewership every single night. So that's why I did it. But still, a big thing.
You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy is people from the mainstream actually follow us on Twitter. Like, actually,
Yeah.
Like, I wonder, and also, I'm not saying this stuff just to be malicious, just to be like, you know, just hating on the mainstream media. If they suddenly turned around and started covering the real news and stopped doing politics, which is like, when that happens, I think hell's gonna freeze over when that happens. It's never gonna happen. But if they turned around and started covering news that they used to cover way back in the day when they were legit news sources, then I would give them their credit. I'd be like, okay, they've returned back to true form now and they're back to covering news, but they're not going to do that. And I think, honestly, some of the people on mainstream news actually follow us on Twitter. They probably look at us and think, you know, why can't we do that? How come two guys that are about 24, 25 years old are able to cover the topics that we used to cover, but now our mainstream multi-billion-dollar channels can't even cover proper news anymore? They're probably looking at us and wondering why they can't do that themselves.
And it's because they won't change. They're scared to change. And here's the reason why, folks. It's a very complicated sort of a political system that exists in these companies as to why they won't change. They have to go to a board of directors and they have to go, okay, everyone, here's the quarterly reports, all that deal. And then they all chit chat and they go, well, you know, if we just stay dead put and we don't change, I mean, if we change, we could completely collapse our ratings currently. If we keep everything the way it is right now, sure, we're seeing that the ratings are slowly falling, but we're guaranteed this sort of set result if we keep things this way. And that's why they went political and they won't really change back out of that, is because they're scared that if they change right back out of that and just go back to whatever they used to do, which was real news coverage, they might lose all of their ratings and hardly any of their audience they have right now might stay around later. So that's kind of why it's really, like, there's a load of economics and also corporate politics that goes into what those companies do. And that's also something that makes us a lot more flexible. We really don't have a corporation behind us or anything. It's just two folks who do this. So that makes us a lot more flexible in a sense, because we're not having to play a political game with the company and what it's doing and what the future looks like and all that. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least for what I could say as to why they really can't change. But I bet you that there's some people in their company that are going, damn, why can't we do that? And the answer is really that reason. It's the internal politics of how a corporation works. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Espen Turgenhagen, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Espen, as well, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. I do not see a comment attached, but once again, we do appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have yet another 20, this time from Trism666, yet again, the fourth super chat of the night, and we do appreciate that. And Trism said, didn't the neutrality in news rule get removed around Reagan's term in LSA?
Technically, it never actually existed. It was kind of like a quasi-rule that existed, and that is a really deep sort of a rabbit hole in history on public broadcasting systems in America, is that back when radio was the only, I guess you could say, electronic medium to convey information, the government actually realized that radio was an incredibly dangerous weapon for propagandists. And that was well before even about World War I. It was around that time, during World War I and after World War I, that the FCC was originally created, which is the Federal, what is it, Matthew? It's the Federal something Commission, but I'm forgetting the name of it.
Federal Communications?
Oh, yeah, Federal Communications Commission. So that was when the FCC was created. And the Congress also passed an act, this is why the FCC existed, was that they were supposed to regulate radio broadcasting licenses. And doing that, if you wanted to cover anything political, you had to guarantee that you were absolutely neutral. It was militant neutralism that had to be enforced. You had to give incredibly fair coverage to both sides. You couldn't sit there and say, like people would do now, oh, those wicked Republicans or those wicked liberals. You couldn't do that. That was just completely verboten. If you did that, your license was revoked. So you had to be insanely neutral on radio. So when TV started to become a medium in the late 40s and then on into the very early 50s, a lot of these companies that had started off on radio moved into television. And they sat there and they started to go, we don't want the government coming in and regulating everything on television because that can end up hitting our bottom lines. So what we are going to do is that we are going to enforce insanely militant neutralism on our own to ensure that there's no government oversight of our political neutrality. So that was what brought in the era of what we call the golden age of news. People like Walter Cronkite and people who were incredibly neutral and it was straight to business, is because those companies enforced those rules on their own because they said, if we go politically, heavily politically into it and we go lean heavily to the far left or the far right, the Congress is going to come in and regulate this thing like they did the radio. So through the 50s to about the latter end of the 70s, and really honestly, kind of into the early 80s a little bit, things stayed insanely neutral on pretty much all media outlets. On top of that, that was also back in the day when news wasn't profit-driven. The news segment on most running cable networks during that time usually ran for, as many of y'all would know, about 15 minutes to an hour a day, and they didn't take up a lot of airtime. They weren't 24/7. And they also were expected to take a loss. They strategically planned in these companies during that era that the news shows would bring in losses. Not a lot of people watched news back then. Like, for people to say that people cared about news back then, they're full of shit. People didn't care about news back then. Those shows actually lost those broadcasting companies money every time they ran, every day. But they still ran them to make sure that the government wouldn't get involved and to make sure that they showed that they were really neutral, so that the government would never think about getting involved because they go, it's self-regulating, it's fine. So then things started to change around the 80s, and the late 80s, really into the early 90s. And that's actually when you would see the emergence of CNN and Fox News. Because the Congress never regulated television in its earlier years, in its formative years, it completely passed over everyone's minds to regulate it later, even still to this day, to make it to where it's militantly neutral. So what these companies like CNN and Fox started to do when they emerged, they just took advantage of an unregulated space. There was no regulations. So they just went insanely heavy into politics. So where CNN went left, Fox went right. The rest is history. Everyone knows how that turned out. But that's why there really is no regulation in the television sphere on any type of news coverage. You'll see that anyone from any news network has a clear political leaning these days. And that's because they cultivated those audiences way back in the 90s, and that's where their rating base lies. If they change that, they're going to lose their ratings. They're going to lose a lot of their earning potential because they sell ad slots. That's also how television works, if y'all didn't know. Ratings is what you use for sponsors that want to reach out to you. Like, sponsors will go and they'll look at the ratings, and sponsors can be any company in America. And so a sponsor will look at these ratings, they'll go, ooh, like, that news company is doing really damn good. Like, that is insanely good ratings. Or those television shows, like, for example, in the early 2000s, The Sopranos on HBO was a primetime ad slot. The ratings were incredible. So if you got an ad slot in the middle of a Sopranos commercial break, that was insanely expensive. That's how HBO rose to fame, and that's also how HBO got enough money to finance further projects, was also off of selling those primetime ad slots. And that's exactly how modern-day 24/7 news works, is that they have to keep people on theirs for those ratings to be decent, for those ad slots to actually be sellable, worth some good money. And so these companies go, okay, so we have a set rating base here, and we know that this is the rate that we can sell these ad slots to sponsors. If we change this formula, our ratings can drop, and that means that our commercial break revenue can drop, and that means that we're not making money. And so that's really how the whole sort of a television system works, and that's also why these people are heavily entrenched, either in being far right or far left. They're scared of losing their viewer bases, and that means their ratings, and that then results in losing hard cash. So that's how that whole thing works, to try and explain it. And there generally is no enforced neutrality on television, unlike radio. Radio is militantly enforced. Television really has no enforcement. So I hope that addresses that the best I can. A big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, if people aren't familiar with this, the reason why you see sometimes billionaires buying these large news outlets and things like that, you'll think, why'd that person right there that started a certain service want to go buy this newspaper out there? Well, to me, it's pretty self-explanatory. They want a way to be able to get their message out, and they want a way to be able to change public opinion and influence through that way. And it's the perfect way to do it. That's why, in my opinion, they buy them. Some people may debate that. They might dispute it, but I think that's the reason why they really do it. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Praptor, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Praptor, for that support. They said LSA and take one from the chat.
And we will make sure to take one from the chat. And a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. Also, a lot of people caught me here. I used The Sopranos as an example because it was a show that I knew had supreme ratings in the early 2000s. But HBO is a subscription service, so I messed up there. So I'll use another example. This one's one that will work because I know that it was on television. Seinfeld on NBC. That one was one that was on television, and those ad slots were prime time because the ratings were incredibly good. So that means that if you put an ad in that slot, a lot of people are going to see it. It's a little bit funny just to explain to y'all really quickly, but that's how YouTube kind of works as well. But we don't work on a rating system on YouTube. We actually work on more so a viewership and subscribership metric. And that's fairly interesting. And you can actually, like, YouTube's a very sort of a Wild West kind of world with sponsorships. Some sponsors will offer very little money. Some of them will offer a great deal because some of them lowball all the time historically, and they'll only go with people who accept lowball offers, while others will just go for whatever will get them the most viewership. But it generally works a little bit differently on YouTube, but it's kind of the same thing. The bigger your channel is, the more subscribers you have, and the more consistent viewership that you have, along with a longer view duration, that directly results in sponsors wanting to reach out to you and get a sponsorship on your show, whether it's a live stream or a video. One thing that's actually a little bit unique about the Enforcer channel, speaking about that, is that we are one of the few live streams that are in the top 100 in the United States that doesn't run sponsors on our shows, because we just don't. And also, I don't really like that idea. Like, it's like, tonight's war is sponsored by, and it's like, I don't really, like, it's like, that doesn't really sound that good to me. And also, it starts to commercialize the whole thing. And we generally pride ourselves here on running a prime service and not making it overly monetized. But that's generally how that sort of a system works, if you ever wonder about it on YouTube. Fairly similar, but different in some ways on how you market it in terms of the cost. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to none other than Shadow Skill 54, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Shadow Skill, for that support. They said, if Poland and eventually NATO send troops into Ukraine, would that stop Russia from moving into other parts of Europe?
I would highly doubt it because it seems as though they are viewing that as some sort of a beginning to a war, at least by what Lavrov was saying, although they already consider themselves in a de facto war with NATO, which is kind of the paradoxical part of that. But beyond that, I would say it probably wouldn't. If they're adamant on starting a war with Europe, they're going to start it no matter what we do, whether we're in there or not. But I think we would be in a better position if we were in Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kai B, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much as well for that support right there. And they said like and subscribe, and only 4,000 left.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I have to say, we are very close to 500,000 subscribers. We're actually about 3.2 thousand away at this point because we're at 496,700 subscribers. So hopefully we'll be able to get on up there and get to 500,000 here soon, because that would be really cool to see. 500,000 subscribers. Not a lot of channels have that on YouTube, I don't think. And let me check that really quickly. I want to check that while we're on air because I haven't checked this recently. So let me check it if I can. So come on, load. Oh wow! So we are the 35,000th largest channel in the United States, and we are the 165,000th largest channel in the world. There were about 34 million active YouTube channels, so that's way on up there. That's like in the top 0.1% of YouTube channels, actually, in terms of size, which is really weird. Like, I cannot believe that it really is the case. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Andrew Barbaro, and he puts in a 10. And he said, LSA hit that like button, and remember to subscribe, and how's everyone doing?
Hey, and hit that subscribe button, folks, and hit that like button. We're up to 4,100 likes nearly. We're one away right now. And we're doing pretty good. I think we're doing great. We're doing swell. We're hanging in. We're surviving, thriving sometimes. And so I got to thank you massively for the support and help this channel to keep running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jack Ragnarsson, and he puts in a 10. And he said, I gotta say, I'm glad I was wrong about my prediction that Russia would attack today, but we are far from it cooling down, and I still think Putin is stupid enough to attack NATO, but the question is when?
That's exactly what I would say. It's really a matter of not if, it's a matter of when right now, as far as an attack on NATO, from what it looks like right now with how things are going. But generally, also, one thing I would say, that's why I would never get into ever getting down to a specific day, because specific days usually always end up being wrong. And there's actually a very scientific way that we go about doing our predictions here in this channel, to where they have a decent amount of success to it. We never predict specific days. We usually come up with multiple different percentages of chances to happen. So one of them will happen. It's just a matter of how much of a case it will happen. So we never go, it's guaranteed to happen then, and it's on this day. We'll go, there's a high chance that's going to happen at some point in this larger time window. And that's usually why those analyses end up becoming correct, because a lot of people always get caught in the weeds when they make analysis. And a lot of people do that even in the quote-unquote expert and analyst quarters, or corners of like the legacy media outlets, is that they act like they have to get it down to a specific day, and also a specific, like a literal specific time of day, and also what exactly is going to be happening with 100% certainty. And I don't know what the hell they think they are, like Zoltar, the fortune teller, but nobody can do that. That's just physically impossible, scientifically impossible. They're hoping for a lottery at that point. So we do our predictions a lot more consistently and accurately, because we allow for error. We also allow for statistical probabilities of different likely courses of action, and then we also give it a sizable time window to work off of. If you follow those sorts of rules, generally predictions end up becoming a decent bit more likely to happen, because usually, well, like a lot of our predictions on this channel, we'll say something like, Israel will strike Iran within at least less than a month, and it ends up being correct. It was within less than a month, and we also said that it's likely that they will strike, but it's also likely that they could do this other action, but it's a smaller chance, and then that ends up becoming correct anyway. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well. A big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. But I'm happy that it didn't start today either. I'd have to agree, but it is only a matter of when. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bobby43. It's LC39A once again, and he throws in a $100 donation this time, 100 Canadian. And thank you very much, Bobby, as well, for that second support of the night. Very generous of you. And he said, "You have not said hi to me since yesterday, LOL."
Well, hello there.
Hello there,
Bobby.
Hello.
Hello. But still, imagine.
Hello, Jack. How you doing?
Oh, Jack. The tennis court, the badminton,
Look, you gotta get the tennis ball, you gotta cut a hole in it. You sit there, you fill it with sand, you throw it in it.
Well, anyways, you throw it at the Himalayas. But beyond that, I gotta say,
Butter sock. Keep the butter in the sock. A big sock. Anyway.
look, you know what they say. You gotta butter them up.
Look, let me tell you something. Back in the Marines, they butter them up real good. Yeah, butter socks. They hit you with a butter sock, slam you in the bung, hold you down.
Beer butter, no margarine.
Anyways, Corn Pop was a bad dude. They ran bunch of bad boys. But anyways.
I can't believe it's butter. Excuse me, I can't believe it. It's not Xi Jinping Himalayas. Anyway, it's not butter.
Look, I gotta ask y'all a question. Back at Scranton, when they hit you on the butt, and you went, because they scared you, did they call it butter? Yeah, they did. Let's talk about buttered sausage. Let's talk about butters. Anyways, beyond that, big thing.
Gary Busey's jumping in.
Let's talk about buttered sausage. Why is it here? What is it doing? Get it out of my face. Buttered sausage.
Dude, honestly, man, that was unhinged. That was a deep fake, by the way, weirdly enough. I thought it was real for the longest time. But anyways, beyond that, I thank you so much for the massive support, Bobby43, helping this channel to keep on running. And, I'm going to throw in a little fact out there for y'all, a bonus fact. Mandy, how many super chats do we have left, by the way?
We have a good bit. We actually have 25 or 30 left.
Oh, shoot. This will have to be a quick one, but let me go pull this up. The Strasbourg Railway. Come on. Strasbourg Railway. Come on. Here we go. This railroad? Where the hell is it? Here we are. Is this it? I think this is it. The Strasbourg. Yeah, wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is in Pennsylvania. This is the oldest running railroad in American history. It was founded in a charter from the 1850s, and it still operates as an independent railroad to this day. Found that out on my trip to Salt Lake City. I was reading a book about the top 100 railroads in America, and they were like, this one's unique because it's the only one that's still operating under the same company since 1852. And I was like, that is so cool. And they actually do run revenue services with these steam trains, not just for like tourist excursions. They actually do freight. And I wish I could show that to y'all, but I don't think they have a good picture of that here on Google. But it was really cool. They actually pull like Matthew, those giant modern like 60-foot box cars and stuff with those little steam engines. It's really cool stuff. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you once again for support, Bobby43, and allowing me to go down a quick little rabbit hole. But we are going to have to, of course, speed things up from here because we are running out of time. And so with that, big huge thanks to you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to OK State 42, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, good sir, as well. They said the Israeli Defense Ministry announced on Wednesday that Israel's Iron Beam is now operational and that a full series of batteries will be deployed across the country to provide drone defense in the coming months.
And I thank you so much for the support and sharing that. I actually did hear about that today. I just didn't include it in the news for some reason. I don't know why I decided not to. I think it was for the Aleppo explosion. That's why I sacrificed that for. But beyond that, it is finally serviceable. I remember way back in the day, in the first drone and missile attacks that Iran conducted against Israel, and I think the latter part of 2024, they said they were fielding that thing for the first time ever, and we never saw proof that it was ever used. So looks like they're finally getting to fielding it. So a huge thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Praptor once again, who puts in a 10 and said, will China help defend Venezuela if the U.S. attacks, or will Venezuela become a Chinese proxy force?
China will end up making Venezuela a proxy force, but China has no way or ability right now to be able to help defend Venezuela from an attack because they lack the power projection capabilities at the moment. So a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And like Cody Fritz said, whoever governs YouTube has to have that iron in them. And it's true, they do have to have that iron in them. This used to be a vacant site. Today and tomorrow, YouTube is a metropolis. But anyways, moving on from that little delirium there for a second, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to Aaron Ruth, and he puts in a 10. He said, ha 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 ha. You didn't set a bunch of political rants. You set a sting of naming jokes. Also, Pluto is a planet.
You know, I'm actually in that camp. I think Pluto is a planet. I remember when it was a planet and then they knocked it off the planetary registry, and I was like, why the hell would they do that? It's like, it's a planet. It's like, it obviously is. That's what I learned as a kid. And
I thought
honestly,
it was a dog.
Huh?
I thought it was a dog.
No, man, that's Pluto. Man, that's
Pluto. You don't know about Pluto, the Disney dog?
Be careful. The cease and desist lawyers could be coming for us. We cannot mention that dog. He does not exist. But
man,
beyond,
Pluto, no Bluto.
Man, honestly, Bluto was that asshole in Popeye, that went around.
Oh
yeah, it's that guy. It's that guy. Yeah, it was him. But Pluto's a dog. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and help this channel to keep on running. And thank you for the kind words, Aaron Ruth. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than King Sickness, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, I hate to say it, but a cargo ship with drones could do a lot of damage.
That's true, actually. It could do a lot of damage. But the folks down at the Port Authority of Long Beach will do more damage before they get here, but still knock off another 30 containers off of a ship. That was crazy. I don't know if you saw the footage of that, but down in Long Beach, they had a major incident where I think they didn't trim the ballast of the ship properly, or they were loading the container. I don't know what it was, but it was something that led to the ship tilting, and just stacks of containers went pouring off into the port itself. It was a shame, really. It's caused a bit of an issue down there, but a little bit crazy with that. That was wild to see. Like, that rarely ever happens. They have a specific system of loading and unloading ships where that's never supposed to happen, and it did. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Luke UK, who puts in a 10. He said, hello, Enforcer. Hello, Enforcer Matt. And hello there. He said, please take a live chat question and LLT LOC. And we shall, Luke. And thank you very much for that fine support right there. That fine, very juicy support. We do appreciate that. And we shall grab a live chat question. And this one goes to Dalton. He said, when do you think we'll see the first nuke used? Thank you, sir. LOC.
Oh, that was a direct question. Like, when will a nuke be used? Thank you, sir. I wouldn't know, unfortunately. That is beyond my abilities, crystal balling wise. Will World War III begin? It looks like it will, but we're not entirely sure. There's always a chance it might not. Might be de-escalation. If World War begins, will we negotiate our way out of it? It's unknown. We might, within the first month or weeks. And if we don't, will it become nuclear? That's many different hurdles that we have to jump over that we're not really sure of the probabilities of to be able to say when and if a nuclear weapon would ever be used. So unfortunately for now, I'd have to declare ignorance on that. But thank you for sponsoring a live chat and helping this channel to keep running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Don't Bother, who puts in the 10. He said, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Now talk about things so I can listen and know what I'm talking about. Also, LOL, J20.
And I thank you for the support. And a pretty funny one. And it's crazy. It's crazy because sometimes someone will say something and they will have literally gotten it from the show. I don't know where else they would have gotten it from, because we'll say something like, oh, this and that, and that's happening. And then we'll move on, and like an hour and a half later, we'll say something else, and it's kind of like on that same topic that we're talking about before. And then someone in the chat will be like, "You're wrong because this happened." It's like they literally got that from watching the show. It's like we were the only people to say that on the internet all day, and I'm like, where do these people get off saying this stuff? It's like we literally just told you about that an hour and a half ago. It's like, but anyways, the big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that has addressed that well, but I have to agree with you. It goes hard. It really does. But a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Secrets, who puts in a 10. And they said, are you aware of China only receiving 1/3 of the barrels that Maduro agreed to? Apparently they owe several billion. And rumor is U.S. and Chinese diplomats are meeting with the exiled president-elect in Spain.
I actually have not heard about all of that. This is a very interesting story of diplomatic intrigue that I'll have to look into. But fortunately, at the moment, I had to declare ignorance on that. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from the Playmaker 1271, and thank you very much, Playmaker, for that support. They said, continuing from yesterday, the best defense versus Russian drones is a good offense. Russian drone production is day to day, and one F-35 with a couple of well-placed AGMs, and it's RIP to the Russian drone production capability.
You could say that, and there's a possibility. But at the same time, we have to clear the airspace out before that. And they have time then to be able to do whatever they're going to do. So there's a chance, but at the same time, there's also an equal chance that it might not go well. And that's why we need drone defenses. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel keep on running. I hope that it's addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Con Air, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Con Air, for that support right there. Also, by the way, Con Air, I don't want to name the individual specifically. I don't want to get too deep into it. We kind of touched on it earlier, but I think we'll avoid going straight into it. But just to make it clear, just generally speaking, I do not support the government using regulatory leverage over private companies to silence free speech. I absolutely do not support that under any circumstance. I don't care what the hell the person said. I don't support that. If someone says something stupid and the company wants to fire them on their own accord, that's up to that company. But if there's any type, and I mean even an ounce, of any plausible government interference in that decision, then that is a violation of the First Amendment, in my personal opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree with that. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Con LSA, who puts in the 10. And thank you very much, Con, as well, for that support. They said the country of Brazil is the same size as the entire USA, and the U.S. is declaring war on South America is insane, and we will be fighting this war for the next 100 years.
I would say it's not necessarily insane. And also, we're not invading Brazil, we're invading Venezuela. So, while they might be similar to the size of the United States, Venezuela isn't. And I'd also have to say that we won't be fighting it for the next 100 years because they have a tendency down there to kind of just collapse pretty quickly. And also on top of that, I generally have to say, Matt, they kind of censored this, but I generally have to argue against the idea that this is racist because it has nothing to do with their race in either argument, either if you're going off of our foreign policy argument, which is curbing Chinese influence, which is a strategic ambition, or if you go off the idea that they're supporting drug cartels, which is what the administration is officially saying. Either way, there's really no way that race plays a major role in the decision as to whether or not we're doing anything against Venezuela. Because if it did, wouldn't we be going to war with pretty much everyone in Central and South America? Because it's a different ethnic group than the majority of the United States. Like that doesn't like I don't really think that argument holds up too well that it's a racist war. Like just because the United States is going to war with a country that has a different ethnic makeup than the United States doesn't mean it's a racist war every single time. It's just that every other country in the world is different than America, so they're going to have a different racial makeup, but there's more so larger underlying issues underhand rather than racial reasons, at least to me. But thanks for the support. I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than, let me scroll back up. This one goes to Noel P. And Noel puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Noel. He said, would you avoid visiting Western Poland at all, given the recent news?
Oh no, I would visit Poland. Like Poland's pretty cool. I like Poland. It's just we don't really have to worry about that now because we'll never have the free time to be able to travel to Poland, at least for now. But one day we might, and I would travel there. I think Poland's pretty cool. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mr. who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, Mr., for that support right there. And he does recommend a certain channel right there. I'll be honest with you, Mr. No offense, by the way. That individual there, I do have a little reservation about. I have dealt with him before, and nothing personal against the guy, but I just personally don't see where he's coming from on a lot of stuff. So I get the fact that some people respect him, but me personally, I just sort of like stay in my own lane on that one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree, and I'll just leave it at that. So a big thanks to you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, CK, for that support. He said, take a live chat question.
Hey, we will. And so what do we got, Matthew, for a live chat?
And the live chat question goes to Plexus Gaming, who said, do you think that NATO will enter Ukraine if Russia attacks NATO territory and forces?
Can you reread that one?
They said, do you think that NATO will enter Ukraine if Russia attacks NATO territory and forces?
I would generally assume so. Ukraine would not be in NATO still, at least at that point, due to the provisions in the charter, but we would consider Ukraine to be an allied force on the NATO side. So I would say yes, because that would generally open up additional attack paths towards Moscow and Volgograd if we would like to exercise those campaigns or offensives, at least to our strategic judgment if it was available at the time. So a big thanks to you for sponsoring that live chat, CK Bold. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Alan Gwenner, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Alan, for that support. He said, face it, the Ukraine war has already spilled over the geographical borders, and NATO is being challenged by Russia directly. It's time to scramble.
I got to thank you so much for the support, and I definitely agree on that, without a doubt. I've got to say that we have to be ready to go up against the Russian Federation at any moment in time, and I've got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is a $5 support from none other than Braden Jones. And thank you very much, Braden, for that support as well. He said, USA number 1, USA number 1, Taiwan number 2, China number 196. And he had some words for winning the poop. And he said, LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, and don't trust China. China is asshole. But beyond that, thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to none other than Mr. Funny Bones. And thank you very much, Mr. Funny Bones, for that $5 support. We do appreciate that very much. And also, we have a 5 from Super Creech. And Super Creech said, new jet-powered Russian drone that's jam-proof with foreign parts and hope it sucks.
I would hope it sucks. I would think it sucks because nothing is 100% jam-proof. Something will eventually jam it. So I think it'll get shot down anyways, most likely. But still, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Connor Guartafino, and Connor puts in a 5. And he said, did y'all see that Israel completed testing on the Iron Beam system, and it'll be in active service by the end of the year?
We did hear about that. It didn't make the news because we had heard about the Iron Beam before, but generally we just didn't cover it. So a big thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that well. And also, what I'm doing, Matthew, I was trying to figure out what that super chat was, like the one that just came in. But anyways,
I was talking about something else, but that's a text. That's behind the scenes thing.
Well, nothing. I'm just sitting here. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Big Papa Chester, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Big Papa Chester, for that support right there. He said, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned Saudi Arabia and Pakistan made a defense pact. And given that India and Pakistan's recent tensions, how will that end?
I don't really know. This is generally a defensive pact that is supposed to be against the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I don't really know what would happen in the event of another war with India, because clearly Saudi Arabia has no ability to power project to support the Pakistanis in that sort of a conflict. So I would generally be honest. I really do not know what in the world would happen if they go back to war. And obviously, they will most likely be going back to war because the water treaty issue still has not been resolved for the larger part. And so, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Matty Matt, who puts in a 5. And he said, why wouldn't a helicopter or an A-10 work against downing drones on the cheap? And World War II also had passive acoustics for finding them. Cheap, cheap, cheap.
A-10s are pretty expensive to keep flying as well. They cost about, I think, $10,000 an hour to fly. So they're fairly expensive. The weapon systems on board are quite expensive. And the 30mm isn't really the greatest thing to go up against drones with. So generally it's the cost efficiency side of things with that. And also a helicopter is somewhat similar. And also a helicopter has a limited ability to be able to engage because you have to triangulate that helicopter into the location of the drones instead of using just ground air defense forces placed at strategic locations with machine guns and technicals. So that would generally be the issue. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Jack Ray, and he said, could the U.S. interdiction be a Cuban Missile Crisis type of thing? For example, Russia or China trying to put nukes into South America, and it could explain the large or extra large force compared to interdicting drugs.
I would say it's a little unlikely because nuclear weapons ever being put into South America, it's obsolete these days. It was a relevant sort of a situation during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s because ICBMs had not been fully developed at that point and were not fielded in large. So we had to count on more traditional sorts of nuclear forces like intermediate range and short range ballistic missiles to be able to get the nuclear weapons into an enemy country. Nowadays, ICBMs pretty much make that obsolete. So the chances of a nuclear weapon showing up in Venezuela is incredibly low. I mean, slim to none. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Arnold. And thank you very much, Arnold, for that $5 support. He said, good morning from Sweden. And I only use you guys as my news source. And you guys do journalism as it should be done. And go LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running all the way from Sweden. And I have to thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep rolling because you help us to be able to get that news out for you every single morning. You're up at like the crack of dawn, so good morning to you, and I hope you're having a good day over there in Sweden. So a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mario Bermudez, and he puts in a 5. He said, instead of hitting the mobile drone convoys, why not hit the warehouses supplying parts and equipment to Russia, or is it an intel issue?
Generally is a little bit of an intelligence issue. That is the problem there. We know where a few of Russia's drone factories are, but finding them has still been a bit of an issue for some. And we really don't know all the exact locations of those drone factories, at least according to Ukrainian intelligence or Western intelligence for that matter, that's been provided to the public. So we think that they might have an informational or intelligence gap there in that regard. So with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 once more from Trism666, and they give very much Trism as well for that support. They said, do you think that China may use the Venezuela situation to move on Taiwan? Long live Planet Pluto, and good night, LSA.
And I would say it's possible. The precedent that we're laying out in Venezuela might be one that would exacerbate the Taiwan situation, but generally we'll have to wait and see on that and just see how the current administration handles that whole affair, which, you know, hopes are high. I guess we can put it that way. Hopes are high. Well, you know, at least to some extent. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address the best I can. And a good night to you. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Pimp Slap, who put in a 3. And thank you very much for that support, by the way. Also, a big shout out to Plazoth, who put in a 3 as well. And we appreciate the both of you very much for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. And we also have a 3 from LSA Pen Tester, who said, Gulf Catfish Cabin.
I don't know what that means, but I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to 535 Medic, who puts in a 2. He said, we're keeping them on edge until they're exhausted.
Perhaps that could be the case as well, but they do sleep. But it's still a big thanks to you. Let's give us support. I'm just kidding. That's actually a pretty good reason why we may be doing what we're doing right now. But a huge thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Kyle Padell. And thank you very much, Kyle, for that support. He said, fun fact, they are making a new Virginia-class submarine called the Oklahoma SSN 802, and it will be the second vessel named the Oklahoma.
And you know, it's actually quite interesting. We actually have a little picture of it here while it's under construction right there. Look at that. Wow, it's the Oklahoma, a landlocked state that has a submarine named after it. Make it make sense. But yeah, I'm just playing. It's a pretty cool submarine, and hopefully it'll be in service here soon. It looks like it may actually be in sea trials from what these pictures are showing. Maybe it's in service. Oh no, it's still not. Yeah, it's still under construction actually. And this is actually a picture of the USS Virginia. They lied. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support. Very good to hear. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 5. And let's see here. Andrew said, who's benefiting from all these conflicts? And is it the average person who's more concerned about paying bills and putting food on the table? And I think not. And honestly, Andrew, I would say this. People try to make sense of it, like they try to say, "Oh, well, who's there? There must be like a shadow government or something behind the conflicts." It's not really like that. Now there may be some like communication that goes on between governments about de-escalation and things like that, but largely wars are the result of stupid decisions being made by certain world leaders. This time it was Putin. Putin made a stupid decision by invading Ukraine, and it's gone downhill from there. So really, nobody's benefiting from it. Putin's on the verge of collapsing his whole country. The West is on the verge of a potential war with Russia. It's not benefiting a soul. If anybody is, I guess you could say, benefiting from it, I guess you could say the defense companies are, but that's not because they orchestrated it. It's just because they happen to be at the right place at the right time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, generally, and my screen just froze. 1 second, folks. Let me try and get that back up. I would generally say that it really is those people. Like, I know a lot of people don't really like to hear that, but it is the people who are trying to struggle to pay their bills and groceries that actually do benefit from some wars. Like, it's a really hard connection to make because a lot of people are like, well, what does that have to do with me? Well, there's a lot that has to do with those folks. Like, it's an insane amount. The sorts of fertilizers that are used to fertilize our crops, a lot of that's accessed in these foreign countries that may be war zones, that may not be aligned with us or not. A lot of the materials that are used to make cheap iPhones, well, they used to be cheap, not anymore. But the materials that are made to the materials that are used to make the phones that people buy usually are sourced from overseas. We have to be allied with those countries, and sometimes we have to force them to be allied to be friends with us. If you want cheap bananas, we go into Central America, at least historically, and we overthrow a government to keep the bananas flowing, so on and so forth. It actually is those people who are benefiting from this. It's just that they can't really see it because it's a very abstract sort of a thing. But I can promise you that every single war does have an impact on those people every day, whether they know it or not. And that's why I think a lot of people really aren't in support of wars, or they don't really understand why some wars are being fought. It's because they don't understand that connection between them and that war. And a lot of people could always argue that the wars don't benefit these people, and I can give you plenty of examples where people have lost wars and it clearly hasn't benefited their people. So, we could go down that path until the cows came home. But generally, I would say that a lot of these wars are being fought to try and benefit the strategic interest of countries, to put their country in a better position, or to put themselves, like Putin, as an individual into a better position, or, for example, the United States of America, to pretty much keep the Americas American aligned. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Purple Tulip Films, who puts in a 5 and said, "Do you think the current U.S. leadership is not interested in defending NATO, and could that be why Russia's risking expanding the war?"
I'm a little bit unsure on that one. I'll have to say that the jury's out for now on that one. We'll have to see. But a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Alan Averbuch. And he said, Russian drones in Poland was blessing in disguise.
Maybe. I wouldn't know how, but we'll see. Maybe. We'll see. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support and help this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, by the way, I think he might have meant like it was a blessing in disguise, not because the drones were putting people in danger or anything like that, but because it exposed that Poland needed to work on their drone defense, maybe. I think that's what he meant by that. So it was kind of like a wake up call for
Oh.
NATO to get their act together before Russia launches a real war. I think that's what he meant.
Oh, okay. Now, yeah, I would agree with you if that's what you meant. But I originally thought you meant like a drone attack on Poland was a blessing. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I really have no clue on that one. But anyways, a big thanks to you once again for support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to the Playmaker 1271, who puts in the two. He said, with the J20, I don't know. Why is anyone surprised?
Well, some people think that the Chinese make good weapons. Anyway, like, I really don't think they do, at least in my opinion. But anyways, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bruce Lee. He said, new rule, no talk about coastline names, apparently. Honestly, Bruce Lee, I'm like, that's one thing right there. Like, I can't help it. People get offended over the name of the Gulf. It's like, if I happen to call it Gulf of America or I happen to call it Gulf of Mexico, if that it sends people like over the edge, I can't help that. Like, that's one thing there. I can't police my speech like that. Like, that gets way too deep. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. I just can't do it. I refuse. I just absolutely refuse to play political games with naming stuff. Like, I refuse 100%. I don't care who's renaming it. I don't care why. Whatever it was when I was born, that's what I'm using. And there's nothing that's going to change that. If people don't like that, they can get lost. Like I don't want to say that directly, but that's just the way I look at it. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support. And on that one, I'm gonna die on that hill. I'm just gonna call them whatever they were called when I was born, and people are just gonna have to get on board with that or not. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dubstep Kid 801, who puts in a one. He said, Enforcers for life and love you guys.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And we love all of y'all here in the Lee Spring Army. So a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to El Nacional 2 Gallery, who puts in a one. He said, hello from Argentina. New viewer here, and thank you a lot for the non-filtered information. Fellow commentary man, Enforcer, you got my sub.
Hey, and thank you so much for the subscribership. Thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you very much for the kind words. It's cool to know that we have a viewership from all around the world, of the wide world, all the way down there in Argentina. We also have some viewers in a neighboring country to you in Chile, which is pretty cool. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another one from Kyle Padell, and he puts in a 5. And he said, fun fact, Russia is getting oil from Hot Dog Man's greasy glizzies.
Oh my God.
Joking, I will say.
Oh God,
Oh, man,
I'm turning into
glizzy
Quagmire.
gobbler.
Man, I'm turning into Quagmire over here. Oh God! But beyond that, I gotta say that was a good one, Kyle. That one actually got me. So a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, nobody gobbles those glizzies better than the hot dog, man. The glizzy gobbler, I guess I could say. Oh man, glizzies. I don't know how hot dogs ever became known as glizzies. Like, I don't know how the hell that came about. It's another sort of silly name there. But I still call them hot dogs, folks. I'm not calling them glizzies just because they want to rename it a glizzy. But anyway, jumping into our next one. This one goes to El Nacional 2 Gallery once again. They put in a 1 this time. And they said, interesting question here. If the U.S. invades Venezuela, like Panama's invasion called Operation Just Cause, would allies join? Like Iran or Russia and such, foreign concern?
I would generally doubt it because none of their allies have power projection abilities to reach here. Like, if they wanted to join the war, how do they join it? Do they send the Navy? How do they support those ships that far away from their country? They have no overseas bases. Most of them don't, at least. Nobody has a base within Venezuela that's about even less than 5,000 miles away right now as far as their allies are concerned. So how do they join? How do they supply themselves? How do they keep a large fighting force in that area? How do they get them on land in Venezuela and then support their own forces there? Do they live off of Venezuelan supplies? How long do those last? Are those forces practically doomed? Those would be a lot of questions that they would ask, and all the answers aren't good. And so then they would just come up with the answer, hell nah, we're just leaving them alone. Because if we get involved, we're going to lose, and that could be a major prestige hit for us, and then a whole bunch of countries might start running for the hills and then go join America because America beat their ass, China or Russia. So I would say that really none of their allies would come to their aid because they're practically geographically isolated in terms of the kind of military support that could be provided by China, Russia, Iran, or anyone else. So with that, I hope that has addressed it well. Big thanks to you for the support. Great question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, folks, it is now time to move on from our super chats. And a big shout out to everybody once again for supporting the channel tonight, because it's that support that keeps us running every single night. And unlike the mainstream, we rely on the viewer support right there. So y'all keep us on there, and we appreciate that. And that makes us beholden to the viewers, which is a good thing to be when you're running a news channel. But anyways, we are now jumping on to address the viewers' comments right this second, the live chat questions, and the Morse code cutters of the stream. Tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, her Royal Fluffiness Kush, Copiopteryx, and Sire. They said, the Morse code says, are they fishing for tuna, coke, or a bruising out there? Who even knows? LLT LSA.
And it, that's the sound of money. Y'all got that Morse code message dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate the Lee Springer Cinema Corps for getting that correct time and time again. It's truly an amazing and incredible thing. And I got to say, we are absolutely impressed that y'all got that correct again. A big congrats to y'all. And so with that, it's time for us to get a couple of more super chats before we move on into the 3 live chat questions of the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Adam McLean, who puts in a 5. He said, this channel never lets me down. And,
Never gonna
and that's what he
give
said.
you up.
Yeah, I was about to do it, but I
Gonna
forgot the
let
lyrics.
you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. But still, a big thanks to you for the support, Adam McLean. And thank you. We try not to let you down. And everyone else, for that matter. So, big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Epic Trains Canada, who puts in the 5 and said, do you think Russia will try to rename the Gulf of Finland to the Gulf of Russia?
Maybe. I mean, it's not out of the question these days. They might. But I think it's the Gulf of Finland, because it was always called that, and it always will be the Gulf of Finland, like the Baltic, or the Danish Straits, which are through here, or the North Sea, or the Norwegian Sea. You know, it's so they're all called this.
Norwegian Sea.
Norwegian. But the Labrador Sea. This is where they found the Labrador dog. And then this place down here, they said, wow, what do we call this newfound land? And they answered the question in asking the question, and they just left it as Newfound Land. That's the
Saint
name.
Pierre, get out here. And Newfoundland.
Man, they said, meanwhile, man, screw you, asshole. We naming this thing Saint Pierre and Michelin. It's like, bro, why? It's like, why did they do that? It's like, why isn't that just a part of Newfoundland?
I don't know. It's like, who's Michelin? I understand Saint Pierre, but why'd they have to add and Michelin to it? Like, was he insisting that his name got put on the title?
Also, there was apparently some guy who was called Costi, and they're like, man, this Costi guy's an asshole. We're naming this island Anti-Costi Island. Like, we're Anti-Costi. We don't like this guy.
Damn.
Get him the hell out of here. And let's see. Oh, and then there's New Brunswick as compared to the Old Brunswick. Don't eat Old Brunswick stew, folks. It's just not good. The New Brunswick's where it's at. They also have Prince Edward Island, and then they have this really fun named place called the Bay of Fundy, and that's like really deceptive because this is actually like one of the deadliest waters off of the coast of the Americas that you can find, because the rushing of the tides actually creates this swell of a sort that pulls ships towards land around here on the southern end of Nova Scotia. And many shipwrecks have happened down here near Barrington Passage, Clark's Harbor, and so on. Loads of them. Loads of people have lost their lives on the rocks off of Nova Scotia down here because of the ins and outs of the tides at the Bay of Fundy.
You said Prince Edward Island. You said that?
No, in Nova Scotia. Oh, yeah, and Prince Edward Island is right here.
Is there a Prince Andrew Island anywhere?
I don't know what you're talking about. I have no clue. What are you talking about?
I don't know either. Some, islands and, princes. I don't know anything about that.
And then they have this place called Maine. Like, folks, I got to ask you a question. When you have a pipe in the state of Maine that provides water to a house, do you call it a water main? Or is that the whole state? Like, do they call the Department of Waterworks in the state of Maine the water main? That's my question. And I think we need to get
they call it Water Maniac.
Oh, you must have gotten that one while sipping on drinks at Bar Harbor. Bar Harbor, where we find all the bars. Boy, howdy, folks. Let's go on a bar crawl through Bar Harbor. Let's see, what other cheap jokes can we throw in? Let's see.
You get that cheese like you're from Vermont?
But let's see here. Upstate New York. Oh, man, the Five Ponds Wilderness. Whoever came up with that name was a genius. Or better yet, Lake Placid. That sounds fun. Get some via like, but let's see. West Canada, Lake Wilderness. Not even in Canada. It's not even in the west of Canada. This is like closer to East Canada than anything. West Canada Lake. Makes sense, right? It does not. Ferris Lake Wild Forest. Is there a Ferris wheel in there? No, there's trees. Complete lie. Branding fault. These are called the Finger Lakes. Why? Because they look like fingers. And also, on top of that, one other thing I gotta say, why the hell is this town called Buffalo? There were never any buffalo near this city. Why the hell is it called that? Like, they just called it that? Why? Why do they, like, oh, the buffalo, they start down here in the Ohio Valley, but we're gonna name the city that's several hundred miles away from even their historic farthest roaming ranges near the Appalachians. We're gonna call this city Buffalo. And then we're also gonna call this one Brockport. Like, that's not even, like, relevant to the era it was founded. Like, it's like, isn't, like, Brock, like, a skater dude from, like, the 70s? Why the hell did they, you know, it makes no sense to me. It makes no sense. But you know something else that makes no sense to me at all? Is who the hell came up with the name Brampton? Like, I'm going to be honest with y'all. That sounds like someone's taking a fart and they named the town after their fart. Brampton.
Brampton
like,
is my city.
Brampton is my city. It's like, that is a really goofy name. Like honestly though, Canada's got some goated names like Montreal and Ottawa and Toronto and a whole bunch of others like Vancouver. But Brampton is one of their failing points, in my opinion. Kind of like how here in America we have this really goofy city, and I just don't understand it. And it's called Omaha. It's like, isn't that a beach? Like over, like I'm just kidding, folks. Omaha Beach was actually named because of Omaha City. Like if y'all didn't know, but there are some.
You know, Omaha is important for many reasons. Do you know who lives in Omaha?
I have no clue.
Doesn't Warren Buffett live in Omaha?
Oh, he does.
Let me double check that. We'll see. Yeah, born in Omaha, Nebraska. Does he live there? That's the question. Let's see here. I'm trying to find out. Let's see. Does Warren live in there? Let's see here. How come it doesn't say where he lives at?
They're keeping that secret.
Well, no, he's open about where he lives. He lives in like a normal neighborhood. And he's got like security around his house and stuff. So I think he lives in Omaha still. I think.
Now, you know, Matthew, I did find one town name that is pretty dumb, and I'm going to have to point it out. Le Mars. Are they French? Do they live on Mars? No. The answer to both of those is no. They named the city Le Mars. Does it look like Mars? No, that looks like a normal American town. They lied about everything. The branding here is terrible. They need to name this to Town 140 in the Flatlands. like if they named it that, it would work. That is a very good description for that area, but Le Mars?
Sooner or later, they'll name it to the Comrades City number 4500 or something like that.
Man, they're gonna name that. They're gonna name that Intel City 10%. Oh man! And then there's this city called Wall. Do they have a wall? No. Oh, that's actually a pretty cool town.
That's nice,
though.
actually. That's a neat little town. Oh, what is that thing? A rabbit?
The jackrabbit, the jackalope, I think is what that thing is. But gold diggers. No way, we're in LA. Like, no way, we're here. We're here. Oh my God. No way. I can't believe it.
Prices and quality.
I cannot believe it, folks. We're here. We made it. We made it to the big city, LA. Also, there's a Buffalo. There's a real one, folks. Those folks in Buffalo, New York got nothing on this. And that's near the Badlands, which really does look like shit. Like, that place looks rough. But, you know, also, is that where the razors come from? Gillette. Is this where they're from?
The best a man can get.
Indeed. What the hell is this?
What the?
What
is that
the
a
hell?
Bucky's? What is that? A duck? What is
I don't
that,
know what that is. Honestly, like I'm very confused by this thing. What in the hell? What is this?
That is a big wasp.
Electric slide is what this thing is called by Pokey Park. What the hell?
Purchased. Why did they put the person who purchased it on there?
Yo,
this
that
is a
bear...
weird place. Whoa, whoa! What in the hell,
bro? You know what that thing looks like? That looks like that roach. That roach from that meme. Like, you know the like. Hold up, let me go find it. It
looks like somebody just told him, "Bad bear, bad," and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Oh, dude, I can't find this roach. Oh, it's this one. I'm sorry, folks. The only thing I knew it as was the Obama roach, but this thing. Why does it have like a face like that?
Oh, the hell? Man, what the hell is this?
Like, so this is like some Japanese anime thing where like roaches evolved on Mars to become like these superhuman people. But then at some point they turned it into Obama. Like, I don't know why, but that thing's
Man,
like
that's messed up.
nightmare fuel, honestly. Like, honestly.
Yeah, that's messed up.
But this thing is these are the roaches that live on Mars in that anime. It's like a very weird anime. I don't know anything about it rather than it exists. But and everyone said it's weird as hell. But why does it have a face like that? Like, it it actually is kind of similar. But beyond that, let's see. Yeah, this place is weird, absolutely weird. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night, I believe.
All right, so this one goes to Donald, who said, do you think World War III will be end of year or start of next year?
I would generally go with that at this point, considering that the Zapod's almost over, and we haven't seen that the World War is broken out yet. My chances are most likely on that this is most likely going to begin in the earlier part of next year, at least in my opinion. But I do thank you for the great question. Great question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Lucas, who said, what are the chances that the F-35's already flying Venezuelan airspace?
Very unlikely, in my opinion. I don't think that would be happening at least yet at the moment. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And a viewer is Nicholas, who said, could the USA handle all three conflicts at the same time?
I would generally have to say, I think we probably could, but we would be stretched pretty thin. I think Venezuela would definitely have to take a back burner at that point. It'd be a very limited sort of a campaign. We would be conducting probably only a blockade, but an actual ground involvement in Venezuela would be out of the question at that point if we're fighting on 3 points, three fronts at one point. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. We had a peak viewership tonight of 16.7 thousand people, and 125,000 people have watched this stream before the end. I've got to say that we are massively appreciative and thankful for all of y'all being here and, of course, watching. And if y'all did enjoy, please make sure to subscribe. We are here every single day, 6 days a week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the news of the past 24 hours. And also, a huge shout-out to Sully Canuck, who said, LSA! And long live the Lee Spring Army. He threw in a 10, and a massive thanks to you, because that support is greatly appreciated, and it does help us to round this thing out right now. And so a huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again, and we will see you all tomorrow. And if there is enough news to make into a short war video, I'll be the one making it tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Grady, Herom Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again, and a huge shout out to all 125,000 people that joined us by the end of the stream, and we appreciate every single one of you very much for choosing us as your news source, and we will see you tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next night of War News streams, and midday tomorrow for that short war video if there is enough news to cover. But in the meantime, folks, thank you all once again, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.